Feyre stands alone in the forest near the immortal border of Prythian as evening falls, her heart pounding with fear of the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows. If I didn't leave soon, I'd have to navigate my way home in the dark, and the warnings of the town hunters still rang fresh in my mind. Giant wolves were on the prowl, and in numbers. Not to mention whispers of strange folk spotted in the area, tall and eerie and deadly. I had risked much in coming so far into the forest, but we'd finished our last loaf of bread yesterday, and the remainder of our dried meat the day before. Still, I would have rather spent another night with a hungry belly than found myself satisfying the appetite of a wolf. Or a fairy. Feyre moved nimbly between the trees, pressing her hand against her hollow and aching stomach. We wouldn't last another week without food. She crouched in brambles, scanning the clearing where a brook flowed. Hopefully something would come by, hopefully. Feyre sighed, pressing her bow into the ground and leaning her forehead against it. I quieted that relentless, vicious part of my mind to take in the snow-veiled woods. In a moment of quiet solitude, the protagonist reflects on their emotional detachment from the world around them. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done it, bothered to notice anything lovely or interesting. The line underscores a profound sense of melancholy and disconnection from the beauty surrounding them. The howling wind outside the decrepit barn calms into a soft, sighing as the unnamed protagonist stands in the dim light of the stormlit evening. Stolen hours in a decrepit barn with Isaac Hale didn't count. Those times were hungry and empty and sometimes cruel, but never lovely. The storm rages on, but the protagonist's voice carries a quiet resolution, their reflection shifting from regret to a fragile acceptance. The forest was silent, the snowfall pausing as Feyre steadied her bow, her eyes locked on the massive wolf hidden in the brush. If he was a fairy, I should already be running. Her chest tightened as she gripped the iron-tipped arrow, her mind racing with the question, was the wolf alone? The hunter stands frozen between the doe and the massive wolf, his mind racing with the weight of the decision before him. I couldn't afford to miss, not when I had only one ash arrow. If I judged wrongly, my life wasn't the only one that would be lost. Feyre returns to her family's cottage, her boots crunching snow as she kicks ice from the threshold, revealing faded ward markings etched by her father's failed attempt to protect them. Where did you get that? Where do you think I got it? Will it take you long to clean it? Feyre watches Elaine push her hand against her belly, her thoughts drifting to the sisters' quiet indifference to their poverty. It wasn't that Elaine was cruel. She wasn't like Nesta, who had been born with a sneer on her face. The cold evening air hangs heavy in the cottage as Feyre's father's voice rumbles from the fire, his words laced with hollow praise. We hadn't had a summer that easy since. Nesta's snort cuts through the silence, her disdain for any praise or effort unspoken but palpable. We can eat half the meat this week, we can dry the other half. Feyre's father sits motionless, his ruined leg stretched toward the fire, the cane he carved himself propped awkwardly beside him. The memory of the creditor's thugs smashing her father's knee lingers, as Feyre recalls his silent acceptance of her hunting decision. He hadn't bothered to attempt to stand from his seat by the fire, hadn't bothered to look up from his wood carving. I kept quiet, knowing better than to get in the middle of one of their arguments, but I glanced at Nesta's still shiny pair by the door. I'd love a new cloak. I need a new pair of boots. Elaine's voice trembles as she pleads, her eyes darting between Feyre and the money they'll earn from the deer's hide. Please, Feyre. Where did you get this? Feyre's voice is cool and sharp as she replies, her fingers tightening around the bow on her back. The same place I got the deer. In the dimly lit home of the family, tension simmered as Nesta and Elaine shared news that sent ripples of anger through Feyre. You can't chop wood for us, but you want to marry a woodcutter's son. Nesta's blue-gray eyes narrowed as she shifted to address Elaine, her tone laced with mockery. Is there a problem, Feyre? Feyre's jaw tightened as she glared at her father, who remained oblivious, lost in his own world. Believe me, the day you want to marry someone worthy, I'll march up to his house and hand you over. But you're not going to marry Tomas. There's nothing you can do. Claire Bedor told me this afternoon that Tomas is going to propose to me any day now. Nesta's words dripped with disdain as she taunted Feyre, her voice sharp with sarcasm. At least I don't have to resort to rutting in the hay with Isaac Hale like an animal. Feyre's father let out an embarrassed cough, avoiding the conflict as usual. Love won't feed a hungry belly. You're just jealous. I heard them saying how Isaac is going to marry some Greenfield village girl for a handsome dowry. Feyre's voice dropped to a quiet, firm tone as she delivered her final warning. We have nothing to offer them, no dowry, no livestock even. While Tomas might want to marry you, you're a burden. What do you know? You're just a half-wild beast with the nerve to bark orders at all hours of the day and night. Nesta stormed out, leaving Feyre alone with the weight of their fractured family dynamic. Feyre notices the acolytes trailing her through the snow-covered fields, their presence a disruption to her plans to sell hides at the market. May the immortal light shine upon thee, sisters. Nesta scoffs at the acolyte, pushing Elaine forward as she refuses to engage with the religious figures. Go spew your fanatic nonsense to some ninny. Nesta lifts her sleeve to reveal an iron bracelet, the same one Elaine wears, and sneers at the acolyte's reaction. You see this? The acolyte flinches, her confidence shaken by Nesta's display of defiance and the symbol of their family's resistance. Nesta scoffs at the acolyte's silver bells, demanding she wear clothing that does attract fairy monsters. This is what you should be wearing, not some silver bells to attract those fairy monsters. Two farmers' wives pass by, their disgust palpable as one insults the acolyte with a curse. Fairy-loving whore. The acolyte, undeterred, speaks of her past ignorance before hearing the word of the blessed. I lived in such ignorance, too, until I heard the word of the blessed. Nesta dismisses the acolyte's tale, suggesting the girl was eaten by High Fae. She was likely eaten, that's why she hasn't returned. The narrator intervenes, telling the acolyte their cause is not worthy as they walk away. You're fighting an uphill battle. Feyre approaches a mercenary seated near a broken fountain in the village square, her satchel slung over one shoulder. The mercenary's eyes narrow as she assesses Feyre. I have a wolf pelt and a doe hide for sale. I thought you might be interested in purchasing them. You steal them. How? The mercenary examines the wolf hides with practiced hands, her gaze lingering on the pelts as she names her price. I don't need your pity. Someone once did the same for me and mine at a time when we needed it most. Figure it's time to repay what's due. The protagonist stands in a bustling market, her thoughts heavy with the family's inherited fear of the Fae. Protective charms and iron bracelets are common sights, though their true efficacy is uncertain. The weight as heavy as a millstone. She clutches coins from the mercenary, anxiety tightening her chest as she anticipates her sister's inevitable reaction to the sudden wealth. Feyre stands near an invisible wall, her sisters closing in like vultures as she exchanges a tense conversation with a mercenary. Thank you. Don't go far into the woods. I wouldn't even get close to where you were yesterday. Are they going to attack? No one knows what the Fae are planning. Body big as a bear, S, head something like a lion's, and 3 rows of teeth sharper than a shark, S. Feyre's stomach churns as she glances at her sisters, their fragile forms seeming vulnerable against the looming threat. The girl studies the mercenary's scarred hands, her voice trembling as she asks, have you ever faced another type of fairy? You don't want to know, girl, not unless you want to be hurling up your breakfast. I was indeed feeling ill and jumpy. Healer said there was nothing to be done for it, that I'm lucky to be walking with the poison still in my legs. Nesta's fingers dug into Feyre's arm as she pulled her away from the mercenary. They're dangerous, she hissed. Don't go near them again. They're dangerous, don't go near them again. Feyre's voice was quiet as she asked, what could you have done? Challenged him to a fight with your bow and arrows. Your friend is waiting for you. We'd vaguely known each other for years, since my family had moved to the village, but I had never thought much about him until we'd wound up walking down the street together. Sometimes we'd meet every night for a week, others we'd go a month without setting eyes on each other. But every time was the same, a rush of shedding clothes and shared breaths and tongues and teeth. I do hope you two are taking precautions. It's a bit late to pretend to care, I said, but we were careful. Since I couldn't afford it, Isaac himself took the contraceptive brew. He knew I wouldn't have touched him otherwise. I reached into my pocket, drawing out a 20-mark copper. Elaine sucked in a breath, and I didn't bother to look at either of my sisters as I pushed it into her palm and said, "I'll see you at home." But I hadn't scolded them for it, not when Nesta went out a second time to chop more wood without my asking. As good a time as any to broach the subject of Tomas Mandre with Nesta. I turned to her, opening my mouth. The cottage trembles as a monstrous fairy with golden fur and wolfish features erupts into the room, his claws gouging the wooden table. Feyre's sisters scream, her father cowers, and the air crackles with the tension of impending violence. "Get out and be gone." "Who killed Him?" Feyre, gripping a dinner knife, stands between her family and the creature. When asked who killed the wolf, she hesitates, her voice steady but trembling. "Killed who?" The fairy's growl lingers, tinged with something like sorrow. "Killed who?" "The wolf with a gray coat." Fairies couldn't lie, all mortals knew that, but could they smell the lies on human tongues? Feyre stands before a wrathful fae, her voice steady as she confesses, "I killed it." The cold air bites through the room, and her family watches in tense silence. "Liar," he snarls, his eyes narrowing as he circles Feyre, the scent of her blood still thick in the air. Feyre meets his gaze without flinching, her voice rising with defiance. "Can you blame me?" Her sisters weep, but she refuses to back down. "You knew," he accuses, his tone laced with suspicion as he steps closer, his fangs glinting in the firelight. Feyre's hands tremble as she recalls the market, her voice raw with guilt and fury. "If I had known it was one of my kind, I wouldn't have touched it." Her father's warning hangs unspoken in the room. Elaine sobs, begging for mercy, while Nesta shields her younger sister, her expression shifting from guilt to fierce protection as Feyre's words hang in the air. Nesta angles her remaining knife at the beast, demanding, "What is the payment the treaty requires?" "A life for a life. Any unprovoked attacks on fairykind by humans are to be paid only by a human life in exchange." I didn't know about that part of the treaty. Feyre stands trembling as a fairy demands her life, his breath heating her face. "Do it outside," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Not here." "You murdered my friend," the beast snarled. "Murdered him, skinned his corpse, sold it at the market, and then said he deserved it, and yet you have the nerve to question my generosity." Feyre's father pleads, his voice breaking as he begs for her life. "Please, good sir, Feyre is my youngest. I beseech you to spare her." Feyre weighs the fairy's offer, death now or a life of terror in Prythian. She is all. But whatever he meant to say died in his throat as the beast roared again. "I can get gold." "How much is your daughter's life worth to you? Do you think it equates to a sum?" The monsters in our mortal realm were just as bad as those across the wall. When my father didn't reply, I dared another step toward the beast, drawing his attention to me. I had to get him out, get him away from my family. I had no choice but to go. And then, later, I might find an opportunity to slit the beast's throat, or at least disable him long enough to flee. As long as the fairies couldn't find me again, they couldn't hold me to the treaty. The plan hinges on secrecy and timing, with no room for hesitation or error. Feyre wrestles with the weight of her decision, knowing that leaving would betray her family's trust but also fulfill her duty to the Fae. She clutches her dagger, torn between loyalty and the unknown. "When do we go?" "Now." Feyre's hands trembled as she handed over the last of the pelts, her eyes locked on the beast that prowled outside. "I left the money from the pelts on the dresser. It will last you for a time, if you're careful." Her father's voice cracked as he whispered, "You were always too good for here, Feyre." A group of characters gathers to discuss a long-buried secret from the ancient uprising against the High Fae. Knowledge of that weakness, of their susceptibility to ash, was the only reason we'd ever survived against the High Fae during the ancient uprising, a secret betrayed by one of their own. The revelation underscores the fragile balance of power between mortals and Fae, shaped by betrayal and survival. Feyre scans the forest for signs of ash trees, her hands tightening on the reins as her horse remains unnervingly still. My blood chilled further as I uselessly scanned for any signs of the narrow trunk and explosion of branches that I'd learned marked ash trees. The forest's unnatural silence amplifies her dread as she whispers the name of the realm she fears. Prythian, the word was a death knell that echoed through me again and again. She clutches the reins to steady her shaking hands, her mind racing with unanswered questions about the Fae's world. There were few first-hand accounts of Prythian itself. Fair rides at the border of Prythian, the cold wind biting through her cloak as she grapples with the weight of her choices. The beast ahead paces silently, its horns visible against the moonlit snow. Live with him, I reminded myself, again and again and again. Live, not die. Every time I looked at the beast, I could see my father limping through town, pleading for coppers to keep my sisters alive. Even though he'd burned my ash arrow, I'd smuggled my remaining knife in my cloak. Fair stands in a snowy forest under a star-heavy sky, her voice barely audible over the cold silence. She addresses a figure who has not turned to face her. "What manner of fairy are you?" The figure remains motionless, offering no response. Fair's question lingers in the air, weighted by the unspoken truth of her actions. My awe might have subdued my fear, had the place not been so wholly empty and silent. Of course it would be magic, because it was spring here. The doors swung open for him on silent hinges, and he prowled inside. The protagonist stands at the entrance of the towering estate house, tension palpable as they eye the ominous structure. The thought of those claws pawing through my cloak to find my knife made my mouth go dry. I shoved away the fury and terror, and disgust as my horse came to a stop of her own accord at the foot of the stairs. The narrator is pursued by the antagonist through an unspecified location, the tension escalating as the threat becomes imminent. I wouldn't get half a mile before he caught me and tore me to ribbons, as he'd promised. The narrator's voice trembles with fear, underscoring the antagonist's chilling resolve and the inescapable danger closing in. Food, getting food, then running at the next opportune moment. It sounded like a solid plan. Inside, it was even more opulent. No sign of a dungeon, no shouts or pleas rising up from hidden chambers below. A long table filled most of the space. It was laden with food. My mouth watered. At least it was familiar. Another surprise. I lingered by the threshold. That was the first rule we were taught as children, usually in songs or chants. If misfortune forced you to keep company with a fairy, you never drank their wine, never ate their food. Ever. The beast padded to the oversized chair, unless you wanted to wind up enslaved to them in mind and soul. Unless you wanted to wind up dragged back to Prythian. The beast plopped into the chair, the wood groaning, and, in a flash of white light, turned into a golden-haired man. I stifled a cry and pushed myself against the paneled wall, my heart pounding as I realized he was not a man, but a high Fae warrior. "You should eat something," he said. Fair stands rigid in a Prythian hallway, her breath shallow as she faces a Fae with light golden hair. His claws are visible beneath his skin, and his eyes gleam with quiet menace. "Who are you?" The Fae waves a hand toward a table laden with food, his tone gruff and commanding. He lets out a low growl, his green eyes pinning her in place. A second high Fae, red-haired and masked, strides into the hallway, disrupting the tense standoff.
"Said eat. Unless you'd rather faint. The food is fine for you to eat, human."
"Well, what? Is Andras dead then?" A mortal girl actually killed Andras. The golden-masked one gave a low, bitter laugh and pointed at Fair. The treaty's magic brought me right to her doorstep. The stranger whirled with fluid grace. His mask was bronze and fashioned after a fox's features, concealing all but the lower half of his face, along with most of what looked like a wicked, slashing scar from his brow down to his jaw. The summons found the girl responsible. The fox-masked fairy leans forward, his scarred face twisting into a sneer as he addresses the group. "That scrawny thing brought down Andras with a single ash arrow." The golden-haired fairy's clawed hand grazes his goblet, his voice tight with restrained fury. "She admitted to it." The red-haired fairy rises sharply, her voice laced with accusation as she turns to Fair. "Did you enjoy killing my friend, human?" Lucian straightens, his tone dripping with false courtesy as he bows to Fair.
"My apologies, lady. I'm Lucian, courtier and emissary."
The beast introduces Feyre by name, his voice carrying an unsettling authority. Her name is Feyre. Ali's will take you to your room. You could use a bath and fresh clothes. Feyre flinches at the firm touch of the beast's hand on her elbow. A rotund, brown-haired woman in a simple brass bird mask tugged on my arm and inclined her head toward the open door behind us. Her white apron was crisp above her homespun brown dress. A servant. The masks had to be some sort of trend then. The encounter introduces a subtle mystery as the masked servant guides Feyre, hinting at unspoken traditions tied to the trend of masks in the Spring Court. Feyre is led through the opulent halls of the Spring Court by Ali's, her mind racing as she weighs her options for escape.
Maybe we should just take a stand. Maybe it's time to say enough. Dump the girl somewhere, kill her, I don't care, she's nothing but a burden here.
A masked high fae intervenes, their voice firm as they declare, "No, not until we know for certain that there is no other way will we make a move. And as for the girl, she stays, unharmed. End of discussion."
Then you've got your work cut out for you, old son. I'm sure her life will be a fine replacement for Andrews's. Maybe she can even train with the others on the border.
Feyre is stripped, bathed, and dressed in a velvet turquoise gown, her discomfort palpable as she clings to the familiar weight of her old clothes. Feyre sits in a lavishly decorated bedroom, surrounded by opulence that makes her feel both awed and uneasy. She runs her hands over the golden thread embroidered on a tunic, noting its extravagance. The few stories I'd heard had been wrong, or 500 years of separation had muddled them. She might be a servant, but she could easily kill me too. A chill scuttled down my spine. It had been days since I'd left. The venison would be running low already. You're hardly more than skin and bones. Winter does that to poor mortals. If you're wise, you'll keep your mouth shut and your ears open. It'll do you more good here than a loose tongue. Ali's warns the narrator, her voice steady but edged with caution. The air between them feels charged with unspoken tension. And keep your wits about you. Even your senses will try to betray you here. So keep your head down, and none of them will bother you. Tamlin rose, stalking around the table, closer and closer, each movement smooth and lethal, a predator blooded with power. He picked up a dish, brought it over to me, and piled some meat and sauce on my plate. I said quietly, "I can serve myself." Tamlin paused, so close that one swipe of those claws lurking under his skin could rip her throat out. That was why the leather baldric bore no weapons. Why use them when you were a weapon yourself?
It's an honor for a human to be served by a high fae.
Feyre swallowed hard, her hands pinned beneath her thighs as she stared at Tamlin and Lucien, who watched her too closely to be casual.
You look better than before.
Lucien coughed and looked to Tamlin, prompting Tamlin to frown as if searching for anything to say to Feyre.
Your hair is clean.
The speaker grapples with self-doubt, their internal conflict evident as they confront their own insecurities. "I wouldn't want to talk to me either." The line reveals a shift from confusion to a sharp, self-aware sarcasm that hints at deeper emotional turmoil. "My family is starving. Please let me go. There must be some other loophole out of the treaty's rules, some other way to atone."
Have you even apologized yet?
"I'm sorry."
How did you kill him? Was it a bloody fight or just cold-blooded murder?
"I shot him with an ash arrow, and then an ordinary arrow through the eye. He didn't put up a fight. After the first shot, he just stared at me."
Enough, Lucien. On everything that I am and possess. Do not do whatever it was you were contemplating. If you flee, your family will no longer be cared for. Is that not a fair bargain?
Feyre picks up the silver fork, her nostrils flaring as she sniffs the food on her plate. No metallic stench of magic. The fairies couldn't lie. She takes a bite of chicken, her expression betraying the effort to keep from grunting. One glance at Tamlin's smoldering green eyes told me what I wanted to know. His guest or not, I had to be right about the food then.
One more bite and you'll hurl your guts up. Won't you stay for wine?
"You're high fae. I'd ask why you'd even bother inviting me here at all, or dining with me." Tamlin and Lucien interrogate Feyre in a cottage within a high fae estate, their questions probing her past and emotional state. "No," I said as casually as I could.
I kill too often as it is, and you're insignificant enough to not ruffle this estate.
Why bother to ask at all, when I'll be stuck here for the rest of my life? Fair's vulnerability surfaces as she confronts the futility of her situation, her voice tinged with anger and resignation.
We wanted to learn more about you, since you'll be here for a good while.
Tamlin's reluctant generosity contrasts with Lucian's amusement, revealing the complex power dynamics at play. Nesta lies in bed, her mind racing with thoughts about Tamlin's potential involvement in her family's well-being. She considers the possibility of his aid, though uncertainty lingers. Your hair is clean, a pathetic compliment. As she drifts between thoughts, the door lock clicks, and a sudden screech and thud jolt her upright. Ali's lies in a heap on the floor. I might have kept apologizing were it not for the sneer she gave me. I crossed my arms. It was a warning bell to give me time to run, not a trap. You think a bit of rope snapping in my face will keep me from breaking your bones? My blood went cold. You think that will do anything against one of us? Ali strode over to the remnants of the curtains and threw them open, revealing a sky that was still a deep periwinkle, splashed with hues of pumpkin and magenta from the rising dawn. Fair stands before a grand staircase, her eyes drawn to a riot of color in a painting that defies the shadowy background. A vase of flowers seems to glow with its own light. I'd never seen anything like it.
Where are you going? He said, gruffly enough that it almost sounded like a demand.
The unnamed character's initial contentment shifts to frustration as they confront a perceived betrayal. At least it was a better greeting than you. You said my time was to be spent however I wanted. Fair steps into the manor, her voice tinged with confusion as she says, I didn't realize I was under house arrest.
Of course you're not under house arrest.
Tamlin's jaw tightens, his tone mocking as he offers, do you want a tour? No, thank you, she replies, edging around him with awkward movements.
I've been sitting inside all morning, I need some fresh air, and you're insignificant enough that you wouldn't be a bother.
Fair avoids his gaze, stating, I'm fine. You've been generous enough, her voice strained.
I'm not going to kill you, Fair, I don't break my promises.
Fair glances over her shoulder, her voice trembling as she asks, kill, but not harm? Is that another loophole?
That treaty doesn't ban us from doing anything, except for enslaving you.
And do you care to destroy the wall?
I have no interest in the mortal lands, though I can't speak for my kind.
Stuck in masks for nearly 50 years, I would have gone mad, would have peeled my skin off my face. What sort of sickness is it? Yes, there is a chance of it affecting mortals and your territory. More than that, I don't know. We haven't had any progression in decades. Magic seems to have stabilized, even though it's been weakened. A mercenary told me she believed fairies might be thinking of attacking. Is it related? I might take an animal form, but I am civilized fair. A breeze set the branches rustling, a waterfall of white petals flittering down like snow. I'd spent enough time in the woods to trust my instincts. My heart leaped into my throat. Fair steals a knife during dinner, hiding it in her tunic sleeve as she navigates a tense meal with Tamlin and Lucian, determined to avoid suspicion. Fair.
Were you admiring my sword or just contemplating killing me, Fair?
I don't like to hunt. Tamlin's eyes gleam with suspicion as he reveals he knew about Fair's hunting habits, linking her scarred hands to her survival in the woods. Fair's question cuts through the tension, her sharp gaze flicking between Tamlin's warrior's gear and Lucian's sword. So is this what you do with your lives? Spare humans from the treaty and have fine meals?
We also dance with the spirits under the full moon and snatch human babes from their cradles to replace them with changelings. Didn't your mother tell you anything about us?
Fair's fingers dig into the table, her voice steady but edged with defiance. My mother didn't have the time to tell me stories.
How did she die?
Typhus when I was 8.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Let Tamlin dismiss me as a rude, uncouth human not worth his careful watch. I'd be better off persuading Lucian to speak to Tamlin on my behalf, and soon, before any of the others whom they'd mentioned appeared, or this blight of theirs grew. Tomorrow, I'd speak too. Lucian then, test him out a bit. You said I was safe here, so I listened.
If you want a ride across the grounds, if you're interested in your new residence, I can take you.
I'd prefer to spend today alone, I think, but thank you for the offer. Fair's hands tremble as she approaches the stables, her mind racing with the weight of Tamlin's unspoken warnings. The stable boys move in eerie unison, their faces hidden behind grotesque horse masks, their eyes avoiding Fair's gaze entirely.
Morning Fair.
Fair forces a smile, her voice brittle as she attempts to deflect Lucian's probing question.
I'm to patrol the southern woods today, and I'm curious about the abilities you used to bring down my friend.
A stable boy passes her without a glance, his movements unnervingly fluid, his mask frozen in a permanent snarl.
It's been a while since I encountered a human, let alone a fey killer.
But my kind of hunting couldn't be done on horseback. Mine consisted of careful stalking and well-laid traps and snares. I didn't know how to give chase atop a horse. Lucian accepted a quiver of arrows from the returning stable boy with a nod of thanks. Lucian smiled in a way that didn't meet that metal eye or the russet one. I clenched my jaw to keep a retort from slipping off my tongue. If he was forbidden from hurting me, I couldn't fathom why he would invite me along, save to mock me in whatever way he could. No ash arrows today, unfortunately. Well, I suppose I'm already dressed for a hunt. You seem to have enough food on your table that I don't need to add to it. Lucian snorted but didn't say anything else as we passed beneath a flowering lilac, its purple cones drooping low enough to graze my cheek like cool, velvety fingers. You said you were an emissary for Tamlin. Do emissaries usually patrol the grounds? Fair sits in a carriage, her hands gripping the edge as she confronts Lucian and Andros's absence. I'm sorry. I didn't know what he meant to you all.
Tamlin said as much, which was no doubt why he brought you here, or maybe you looked so pathetic in those rags that he took pity on you.
I wouldn't have joined you if I'd known you would use this ride as an excuse to insult me. Lucian's smirk fades as Fair's quiet defiance cuts through his mocking tone. A moment of confusion lingers as the weight of an unspoken apology hangs in the air. Which made the apology sincere, I couldn't sort it out. The uncertainty leaves the situation unresolved, deepening the emotional tension. In the dimly lit stables during the evening, a tense confrontation unfolds as the mysterious figure, likely Rysand, confronts Fair, revealing hidden intentions.
So, when are you going to start trying to persuade me to beseech Tamlin to find a way to free you from the treaty's rules?
What?
Honestly, I'm impressed and flattered you think I have that kind of sway with Tamlin.
Character 1 stood firm, the weight of the treaty evident in their voice as they addressed Fair. 1, if I had my way, you'd be gone, so it wouldn't take much convincing on your part. But there has to be something. Tam's voice carries a cold, mocking edge as he corners Fair, his arrogance shifting into calculated dismissal. But since Tam won't gut you, which was my first choice, you're stuck here. Unless you want to rough it on your own in Prythian, which he looked me up and down, I'd advise against. No, I couldn't just stay here, forever, until I died. Fair masters her uneven breathing, shoving away panicked thoughts as Lucian smirks.
A valiant effort.
She glares at him, and they ride in silence until she asks, where is the rest of Tamlin's court? Lucian's eyes narrow as he quickly asks, how'd you know about the court? Do normal estates have emissaries? And servants chatter. Isn't that why you made them wear bird masks to that party?
Something was sent from the shitholes of hell. The less you know, the better. Tam might not find it troublesome to tell you about the blight, but I wouldn't put it past a human to sell the information to the highest bidder.
Can you shapeshift like Tamlin?
Trying to figure out my weaknesses so you can. Put your bow down, human, and look straight ahead.
I might have wondered if this was some kind of horrible joke, but Lucian's face had gone so very, very pale. The air between them thickened with unspoken dread, his usual sharpness dulled by a fear that refused to be named. A silence stretched, heavy with the weight of something neither of them dared to voice. Look at me. I stared at the coarse trunk of a distant elm, thinking of pleasant things, like hot bread and full bellies. I will fill my belly with you, I will devour you. Look at me.
When you look at it, when you acknowledge it, that's when it becomes real. That's when it can kill you.
I heard its voice in my head. It told me to look. Fair still hears the Baga's voice whispering between the leaves, calling to her, as she and Lucian walk through the forest. I still heard the Baga's voice whispering between the leaves, calling to me. Curious about Lucian's past, Fayer asks if he fought in the war, prompting a defensive response. So you're old, did you fight in the war?
Not as good as Tam, but I know how to handle my weapons.
Fayer's frustration boils over as she snaps at Lucian's teasing tone. Do you ever stop being such a prick?
Much better. The bog was in the forest today. You ran into it.
The gruff high Fae, half-heartedly flattering me, was capable of killing a thing like the bog. The moon showed her face, casting the garden below in silver and shadow. An hour passed, and still Tamlin didn't return. But something moved out in the garden. Fayer layers tunic after tunic, bundling herself in a cloak and stuffing a stolen knife into her boot. The extra clothes in the satchel are a burden she cannot afford. I didn't give myself a chance to panic, to doubt, to do anything but wish I had stolen some food from my breakfast table as I layered on tunic after tunic and bundled myself in a cloak, stuffing the knife I'd stolen into my boot. She surveys the ground beneath her window, confirming no one is outside. Her father, crippled and broken, has arrived to take her away. My father, my crippled, broken father had come. She grasps a trellis of wisteria and eases down the building, wincing at the crunch of gravel beneath her boots as her father limps toward the outer gates. Fayer follows her father toward the open forest gates, her heart pounding as she layers her clothing to spare him some warmth.
Going somewhere.
Fayer freezes as Tamlin's claws pierce her layers, his fangs gleaming in the moonlight. Please, my father, she pleads, voice trembling.
Weren't you warned to keep your wits about you?
Fayer staggers back, her breath catching as she realizes her father is gone. Only her sisters, weeping and clutching a bow of mountain ash, remain. A storm rages as a creature cowers by the gates, its form flickering in the dark. The wind howls, and the sky is split by flashes of lightning. That your human senses would betray you. He steps beyond Fayer, snarling. The creature shimmers with light before darting away like lightning through the storm. In the shadowed woods near a gate, Tamlin's fangs retract as he stares down Fayer, his claws still bared.
Fool, if you're ever going to run away, at least do it in the daytime.
Can you blame me? Fayer stands frozen as her crippled father appears beneath her window, his presence igniting her fury. My crippled father appears beneath my window, and you think I'm not going to run for him. I want to go home. You are not breaking your vow, you are fulfilling it, and then some by staying here. The cottage's chipped paintings flicker in Fayer's vision as her father's claws slowly retract. Insignificant, that's what all those years I'd given them would be, as insignificant as I was to these high fae. And that dream I'd had, of one day living with my father with enough food and money and paint, it had been my dream, no one else's. I can't just give up on it on them. Fayer stands rigid in the dim light, her voice steady as she faces the person who has wronged her. No matter what you say. Her shoulders slump as the weight of realization settles in, her tone softening to a hollow admission. Even if I had been a fool, a stupid, human fool, to believe my father would ever actually come for me.
You're not giving up on them.
Fed and comfortable. If he couldn't lie, if it was true, then it was beyond anything I'd ever dared hope for. My life was now owned by the treaty, but perhaps I'd been freed in another sort of way. What manner of fairies prowl the woods beyond this gate if the bog isn't the worst of them? What was that thing?
A puka, they use your own desires to lure you to some remote place, then they eat you, slowly. Things are different now, it's not safe to travel alone at night, especially if you're human.
I never fired a single one during those 3 days we rode along the border. Fayer moves through the dark halls of the manor, her bare feet silent on the cold tiles as she traces her steps with a bit of paper and a pen. She notes windows and doors, sketching vague markings on the parchment. It was the best I could do, she writes, and to any literate human, my markings would have made no sense. Lucian emerges from the garden, his form towering and lupin, dark stains marking his wake. He limped slightly, Fayer observes, and in the moonlight, dark, shining stains were left in his wake. When at last my eyes adjusted to the returning darkness, he was standing in front of me. Standing, but not quite there. No sign of the baldric or his knives. His clothes were in shreds, long, vicious slashes that made me wonder how he wasn't gutted and dead. Did you kill the bog? Yes. You're hurt. A room with a table and map sits in eerie silence. A hand, drenched in blood, trembles as its owner stares blankly at the floor.
What is that?
I thought I should learn my surroundings.
You can't write, can you?
Fayer stands in the Spring Court's infirmary, her hand bloodied from a wound inflicted during a confrontation. Tamlin, his expression unreadable, stares at the splatter of blood on the marble floor.
Ignorant, insignificant human.
Fayer's voice wavers as she asks, "Where can we clean up your hand?" Tamlin's reply is clipped, his tone laced with weary condescension.
No wonder you became so adept at other things.
Fayer's eyes narrow as she processes Tamlin's words. He turns away, his shoulders stiff, and murmurs, "There's a small infirmary."
There's a small infirmary.
I thought of what Lucian had told me about his isolation, that burden, thought of what Tamlin had mentioned about how these estates should not have been his, and felt sorry for him. The infirmary was well stocked, but was more of a supply closet with a work table than an actual place to host sick fairies. I suppose that was all they needed when they could heal themselves with their immortal powers. But this wound wasn't healing. Tamlin slumped against the edge of the table, gripping his injured hand at the wrist as he watched me sort through the supplies in the cabinets and drawers. I cleaned off his bloody, dirty hand, bracing for the first flash of those claws. But his claws remained retracted, and he kept silent as I bound and wrapped his hand. Surprisingly enough, there were no more than a few vicious cuts, none of them requiring stitching. If Tamlin was that powerful, then the High Lords of Prythian must be near gods. Every mortal instinct in my body bleated in panic at the thought. Fayer hesitates at the grand staircase, her foot hovering above the threshold as Tamlin's voice cuts through the silence. "You can't write, yet you learn to hunt to survive." "How?" he asks, his tone laced with curiosity. "That's what happens when you're responsible for lives other than your own, isn't it? You do what you have to do." Fayer replies, her voice steady despite the tension.
I just want to know what you think you're doing. Lucian's words are sharp, his impatience evident. What are you doing? Tamlin snaps, his claws glinting in the morning light.
"You're not even trying to fake it anymore."
It was a mistake from the start. I can't stomach it, not after what my father did to their kind, to their lands. I won't follow in his footsteps, won't be that sort of person, so back off. Watch your mouth.
A pulsing kind of air hit me in the stomach, and a metallic stench filled my nose. But I couldn't see any magic, only feel it.
Don't push me, Lucian. You think I don't know what's happening on my own lands, what I've got to lose, what's lost already.
Fayer stands frozen as a low, inaudible sound ripples through the air, triggering an immediate reaction from two high fae nearby. A human might not have heard, but both high fae whirled. My heart stumbled. The moment captures Fayer's acute awareness of the fae's supernatural senses and her own vulnerability in their presence. "Are you going out for a ride?"
I'm unavailable today. Whenever you want to go, just say so.
Fayer stands in Tamlin's sunlit halls, her voice quiet as she says, "I don't want to go for a hunt."
Tamlin studies her, his tone shifting as he asks, then what do you want to do?
Fayer hesitates, then admits, "I spied on hunters when I could get away with it, and then practiced until I hit something."
Tamlin flexes his bandaged hand and says, "You have my gratitude," his voice tinged with genuine appreciation.
Fayer avoids his gaze, her voice brittle as she replies, "No, I learned to hunt by starving until I could hit something."
Tamlin's tone softens as he asks, "Has anyone ever taken care of you?"
Fayer's voice trembles as she asks, "Are more creatures like the bog going to come here thanks to the blight?"
I'm an immortal, I have nothing but time, Fayer.
Tamlin scans the hall with rigid tension, his tone laced with forced indifference as he adds, "The force plaguing our lands and powers, that too will pass someday, if we're cauldron blessed." Tamlin waved his hand, and 100 candles sprang to life. The study's opulence overwhelmed Fayer, its grandeur a stark contrast to her humble past. I could read enough to function, enough to form my letters, but so poorly that even signing my name was mortifying. I had to take a break for dinner and to sleep, but I was back in the study before the dawn had fully risen. My finger traced a line of text, and I whispered the words. She grabbed her shoe sta, nd, standing from her pose, po. I would look up their pronunciations later. I suppose the study was more of a library, as I couldn't see any of the walls thanks to the small labyrinths of stacks flanking the main area and a mezzanine dangling above, covered wall to wall in books. But study sounded less intimidating. I meandered through some of the stacks, following a trickle of sunlight to a bank of windows on the far side. I found myself overlooking a rose garden, filled with dozens of hues of crimson and pink and white and yellow. Not a painting, I thought, blinking as I stepped back to view its massive expanse. At first, I could do nothing but stare at its size, at the ambition of it, at the fact that this masterpiece was tucked back here for no one to ever see, as if it was nothing, absolutely nothing, to create something like this. The protagonist examines a detailed mural depicting the territories of the Fae and human realms, revealing the historical division of lands and the dominance of the Fae.
I could help you write to them if that's why you're in here.
Help, you mean a fairy is passing up the opportunity to mock an ignorant mortal.
Why should I mock you for a shortcoming that isn't your fault? Let me help you, I owe you for the hand.
I'm fine.
You think I've got nothing better to do with my time than come up with elaborate ways to humble you.
Lucian doesn't pretend to be anything but what he is. The mural symbolizes the Fae's dominance and the erasure of human history, with human lands rendered as a smear of nothingness. Tamlin's offer to help marks a pivotal moment of unexpected kindness, hinting at his internal conflict and potential growth. The protagonist's mention of Lucian highlights her awareness of Fae deception and her refusal to be manipulated. The scene underscores the tension between humans and Fae, as well as the protagonist's vulnerability and defiance. His snarl set the flames of the candles guttering. It means I don't know you. I don't know who you are, or what you really are, or what you want. You aren't what I had in mind for a human, believe me. A single line echoes through the scene, carrying the weight of unspoken tension. He didn't stop me. But that afternoon, when I went to retrieve my crumpled list from the wastebasket, it was gone. And my pile of books had been disturbed, the titles out of order. It had probably been a servant, I assured myself, calming the tightness in my chest. I hadn't written anything incriminating. There was no way he knew I'd been trying to warn my family. Fair stands outside Lucian's bedroom, her resolve hardened by guilt and determination to uncover secrets about the blight. I haven't seen you around. Lucian, half-dressed and tense, deflects her question about the disturbance in the western forest.
The usual sort, unwanted, nasty creatures raising hell.
Fair presses him, testing his willingness to reveal hidden knowledge about the blight and the treaty.
I'd probably have a weakness for groves of young birch trees in the western woods and freshly slaughtered chickens.
Fair walked through the cultivated gardens and into the wild hills, bow and quiver across her back, Lucian's knife at her side. A satchel with a freshly dead chicken and an extra blade in her boot weighed her down. She paused at a pond, swearing she saw 4 female heads watching her from the water. I hurried my steps. Did Tamlin or Lucian ever grow tired of day after day of eternal spring? I might want a little variation to pass the time. A dense forest looms as the narrator, Fair, sets up snares, her hands trembling with doubt. She whispers to herself, maybe this had been a very bad idea. Maybe Lucian had overestimated my abilities. The air grows tense as a shriek pierces the woods. The snares groan under the weight of a surreal, and the narrator's breath hitches. Another enraged shriek pierced the forest, and my snares groaned as they held and held and held. Emerging from the shadows, the surreal locks eyes with the narrator. Her resolve hardens. Lucian, I decided as I crept up to the fairy in the birch glen, really, truly wanted me dead. I hadn't known what to expect as I entered the ring of white trees, tall and straight as pillars. But it was not the tall, thin-veiled figure in dark tattered robes. Are you one of the surreal? A face that looked like it had been crafted from dried, weather-worn bone, its skin either forgotten or discarded, a lipless mouth and 2 long teeth held by blackened gums, slitted holes for nostrils, and eyes, eyes that were nothing more than swirling pits of milky white. The snare released its grip, and the creature's elongated fingers clicked together as it studied Feyre. Did you set this clever, wicked trap for me? Ask me your questions, human, and then free me. Feyre's voice trembles as she asks Suriel if there's any way to return home. Is there truly no way for me to go home? Not unless you seek to be killed. Feyre's breath catches as she realizes the implications of Suriel's words. Tamlin is a High Lord. They are not merely powerful, they are power. In the Spring Court, Lucien confronts Suriel about the blight ravaging Prythian, demanding answers. I am older than the High Lords, older than Prythian, older than the bones of this world.
Where did the blight come from?
Across the violent Western Sea, there is another fairy kingdom called Hybern, ruled by a wicked, powerful king. The four Naga crept closer, their movements deliberate and predatory, casting long shadows across the terrain. The four Naga crept closer, as if savoring the slowness of the hunt, as if they already knew how I tasted. A heavy silence fell, the protagonist's heartbeat echoing in their chest as the Naga's presence tightened around them like a noose. The scene depicts a tense and violent encounter between Feyre and a pack of Naga, culminating in Tamlin, the High Lord of the Spring Court, rescuing her with lethal force. After the battle, Feyre is physically and emotionally shaken, grappling with the aftermath of the violence and her dependence on Tamlin's intervention. Their interaction reveals a shift in their dynamic, as Feyre recognizes Tamlin's protective instincts and the depth of his commitment to her safety, even as she remains wary of his power and the complexities of their relationship. Survival and vulnerability. The perilous encounter underscores the fragility of life and the resilience required to endure threats, both external and internal. Trust and power dynamics. Feyre's reliance on Tamlin highlights the tension between vulnerability and the authority of those in power, while also questioning the nature of heroism. Moral ambiguity. The violence of the rescue and the bloodshed raise questions about the cost of protection and the blurred line between protector and predator. Identity and belonging. Feyre's reflection on her lack of a home contrasts with Tamlin's unwavering sense of duty, emphasizing themes of displacement and loyalty. Feyre embodies resilience and vulnerability, navigating a world that threatens her existence. Her gratitude toward Tamlin is tempered by fear and a lingering sense of alienation, reflecting her struggle to reconcile her survival with the moral weight of the violence she witnessed. Tamlin is portrayed as a formidable protector, driven by a primal instinct to defend his territory and those within it. His actions reveal a complex character, both a ruthless predator and a deeply caring individual, whose power is intertwined with his sense of responsibility. Symbolizes both the brutality of the encounter and the visceral bond between Feyre and Tamlin, marking them as participants in a shared, violent reality. Represents protection and sacrifice, as Tamlin offers Feyre his blood-stained clothing, symbolizing his role as a guardian and the inevitable cost of his duty. Serve as external threats, embodying chaos and the consequences of unchecked aggression, while also reflecting the moral ambiguity of survival. I couldn't think of a suitable lie, everything was absurd. Is this a poem about murdering me and then burning my body? Leave me alone. Feyre stumbles back a step, realizing how fast the unnamed male character is. His quiet voice cuts through the tension. I'm not insulting you. He observes her with a mix of admiration and concern, noting her hidden strength. Do you even know how to laugh? Feyre shakes off his arm, her anger boiling over as she defiantly shouts. High Lord be damned. Feyre stands defiant under the firelight, her voice sharp as she turns away from Tamlin. I don't want your pity.
What about a friend?
Tamlin's jade eyes gleam as he reveals a forgotten history of Fae and mortal alliances.
500 years ago, enough fairies were friends with mortals that they went to war on their behalf.
Feyre's skepticism clashes with Tamlin's earnest admission of his past. You don't know him, my father wouldn't have bothered to do either.
I was afraid your father might come after you.
The firelight flickers as Feyre's exhaustion and relief settle over her. Paint, I said, barely more than a breath. If it's not too much trouble, could I have some paint and brushes?
Paint you want to paint.
Yes. I'm not any good, but if it's not too much trouble, I'll paint outside, so I don't make a mess, but outside, inside, on the roof, paint wherever you want, I don't care. Thank you, I mean it truly, thank you. Fayer keeps stroking the fairy's hair, even as his hand grows limp, refusing to let go despite Tamlin stepping back from the table. Go and enter eternity.
He's gone, let him go.
Tamlin led Fayer up the stairs, ignoring the bloodstains on her nightgown as they paused at the top of the steps. Because I wouldn't want to die alone.
Why?
I regret what I did to Andres. If he felt such grief, such guilt over a stranger, then Andres. By the time I opened my mouth, he was already down the steps. I watched him, watched every movement he made, the muscles of his body visible through that blood-soaked tunic, watched that invisible weight bearing down on his shoulders. He didn't look at me as he scooped up the broken body and carried it to the garden doors beyond my line of sight. Fayer resolves to explain her apology to Tamlin for Andres, her mind racing with the weight of unspoken words as she descends the stairs. Stay with him, he will keep me safe, and things will get better. Fine, I could do that. Where are we going? A magical glen in Prythian, bathed in thick, golden light, stretches before them. Towering oaks resemble castle spires, while dandelion fluff, crocuses, snowdrops, and bluebells carpet the glade. At its heart lies a shimmering silver pool, its surface dancing with starlight, a rare and precious anomaly in this enchanted realm. The glen feels like a place of rightness, a sanctuary where wonder and healing intertwine. She gazes at the starlight pool, stunned by its impossible beauty, and feels a quiet trust growing between her and Tamlin as he invites her to swim. Her boldness in teasing him hints at the vulnerability she's beginning to let him see. His voice carries a playful challenge as he unbuttons his tunic, revealing golden skin. "Jump in," he says, the invitation dancing in his eyes. It's not just about the starlight, it's about surrendering to the moment, to her, in a way that feels both intimate and fearless. He lounges on the blanket, sipping wine and watching with dry humor. "You made a joke, Fayer," he remarks, amused by her boldness. His words are laced with camaraderie, a reminder that even in this moment of intimacy, the trio's bond remains grounded in shared laughter. The scene pulses with awe at the glen's magic, the quiet intimacy of Tamlin and Fayer's growing connection, and the lighthearted banter that softens the edges of their forced proximity. A sense of belonging and peace lingers, as if the glen itself cradles their evolving relationship. Fayer asks Tamlin why he chose the haunt, and he reveals it was his favorite as a boy.
It was my favorite as a boy, a very long time ago.
Tamlin explains Lucian's tragic past, revealing his father executed the fairy he loved.
Lucian fell in love with a fairy whom his father considered grossly inappropriate for someone of his bloodline. His father had her put down, executed in front of Lucian as his two eldest brothers held him and made him watch.
Tamlin details how Lucian killed one brother, and he killed another to protect him.
Lucian killed one, I killed the other as they had crossed into my territory. I claimed Lucian as my own, named him emissary.
Tamlin shifts tone, asking Fayer what would make her happy, and she admits she doesn't know.
What would be enough to make you happy?
Fayer hesitates, revealing she's never considered happiness beyond her family's safety. She stammers, "I don't know. I've never given that sort of thing any thought beyond getting my sisters safely married off." Fayer shares her emotional backstory with Tamlin, recounting her father's tragic past and her journey as a hunter. Meanwhile, she navigates a tense but evolving relationship with Lucian, who grapples with his own history and guilt over the surreal incident. The scene unfolds in an enchanted pool, blending vulnerability, redemption, and the fragile trust between characters. "I never got to thank you for your advice with the surreal. If you still want me dead, you might have to try a bit harder."
That's not what I intended. I wouldn't shed any tears, but what happened to you?
"I was joking. You can't possibly forgive me that easily for sending you into danger." "No, and part of me would like nothing more than to wallop you for your lack of warning about the surreal. But I understand. I'm a human who killed your friend, who now lives in your house, and you have to deal with me. I understand."
Tam told me that your first shot was to save the Suriel's life, not your own.
It seemed like the right thing to do.
I know far too many high fae and lesser fairies who wouldn't have seen it that way, or bothered.
The enchanted pool's warmth and stillness become a backdrop for revelations. As Feyre's past and Lucian's guarded guilt intersect in a moment of fragile understanding. Feyre stands in the center of a meticulously cleaned room, her eyes tracing the absence of dust and cobwebs that once clung to every surface. All this, he'd done this for me. As if I would have cared about cobwebs or dust. He pauses before a set of wooden doors, his expression shifting as he studies the carved surface. Why do anything this kind?
It's been a long time since there was anyone here who appreciated these things. I like seeing them used again.
He opened the gallery doors, and the breath was knocked from me. The pale wooden floors gleamed in the clean, bright light pouring in from the windows. The air felt heavy, as though the space itself held its breath in anticipation. The room was empty save for a few large chairs and benches for viewing the paintings. Feyre stood in the long gallery, her hand absent-mindedly wrapping around her throat as she looked up at the artworks.
I never knew that humans were capable of.
Feyre wiped at her damp cheeks and said, "Thank you," her hand still over her heart. Tamlin smiled tentatively and added, "Come here whenever you want." Alice led Feyre to an empty room on the first floor, its table laden with canvases, brushes, and an overwhelming array of paints. So many paints, beyond the 4 basic ones I'd hoped for, that the breath was knocked from me again. Then I began to paint. Faye wanders the moonlit garden of the spring court, her thoughts consumed by memories of her family and the guilt of leaving them behind. The garden, once a symbol of Tamlin's love for his late mother, now mirrors her own sense of erasure. She clutches a torn rose, its thorns bleeding her palms, and confronts Tamlin with raw vulnerability. The weight of her self-imposed isolation and the futility of her art overwhelm her. Tamlin's quiet presence and the tenderness of his gesture, kissing her bleeding palm, anchor her in the moment, offering a fragile but profound acknowledgement of her pain. I don't know why I feel so tremendously ashamed of myself for leaving them, why it feels so selfish and horrible to paint. I shouldn't feel that way, should I? I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it.
If it grieves you, then I don't think it's absurd at all.
His lips were smooth against her skin, his breath warm, and her knees buckled as he lifted her other hand to his mouth and kissed it, too.
Don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy.
He stepped closer, releasing one of her hands to tuck the rose she'd plucked behind her ear. The thorns had vanished, leaving only the bloom. I couldn't stop myself from pushing. Why do any of this?
Because your human joy fascinates me, the way you experience things in your lifespan so wildly and deeply and all at once is entrancing. I'm drawn to it even when I know I shouldn't be, even when I try not to be. One day there will be answers for everything.
Feyre lingers in the woods, skulking after admitting her feelings, clutching her bow, arrows, and Lucian's jeweled hunting knife for protection. She sets a trap in the crook of an elm, waiting until Tamlin is ensnared by the vine she'd used as rope. Cruel human. Feyre crosses her arms, staring up at Tamlin dangling upside down, his golden hair shimmering in the morning light. She runs her fingers through his hair, and he purrs, the sound vibrating through her body. Tamlin breaks free, landing gracefully, and asks, "Feeling better today?" He pulls 3 papers from his tunic, offering them to Feyre, a series of 5-line poems. "But just in case, I wanted to give you this." There were 5 of them altogether, and I began sweating at words I didn't recognize. It would take me an entire day just to figure out what these words meant. "Before you bolt or start yelling." His breath warmed the lady's neck, the shell of her ear. There once was a lady most beautiful. But to all she gave a refusal. Feyre's brows rise as Tamlin finishes a poem with a smile, their breath mingling in the quiet moment.
Final word in the 2nd and 4th line of each poem. Your list of words was too interesting to pass up, and not good for love poems at all.
Tamlin pauses before reading the 3rd poem, his amusement growing as Feyre's face burns with realization.
We had contests to see who could write the dirtiest limericks while I was living with my father's warband by the border.
When he finished, I tipped back my head and howled, my laughter like sunshine shattering age-hardened ice. I was still smiling when we walked out of the park and toward the rolling hills, meandering back to the manor. You said, that night in the rose garden, you said that your father had it planted for your parents upon their mating, not wedding.
High fae mostly marry, but if they're blessed, they'll find their mate, their equal, their match in every way.
Where are your parents? What happened to them?
My father was as bad as Lucian's, worse. My two older brothers were just like him, they kept slaves, all of them.
I didn't want to know, had never looked for traces of them, even 500 years later.
I'd realized from an early age that fighting and killing were about the only things I was good at.
Thank you, I said. He shrugged, as if that would dismiss his kindness, the weight of the guilt that still bore down on him. Tamlin's voice was steady, but his hands clenched into fists at his sides as he spoke of his father's court and the bloodshed that followed.
Most high lords are trained from birth in manners and laws and court warfare. When the title fell to me, it was a rough transition. Many of my father's courtiers defected to other courts rather than have a warrior beast snarling at them.
Then they're idiots. You've kept these lands protected from the blight when it seems that others haven't fared so well. They're idiots. In the distance, there were masked fairies atop many of them, building what seemed to be unlit fires. The masked fairies move with eerie precision, their faces obscured by elaborate, featureless masks. The fires they construct remain dark and motionless, casting no light despite the growing darkness around them. Fair halts as she observes the bonfires being set up. What are those?
It's just a spring ceremony.
Tamlin explains the ritual, warning Fair about the dangers of the blight and the uninvited fairies lurking in the gardens. You're not invited to your ceremony.
No, you're not.
We walked back in the sort of tense silence we hadn't endured in weeks. Tamlin bared his teeth in a low snarl.
Stay hidden, and no matter what you overhear, don't come out.
Alone, I looked to either side of the gravel path, like some gawking idiot. I would just get in the way. I silently swore and froze.
I know what day it is.
A whisper lingers in the air, fragmented and haunting. Someone who wasn't there. The words hang, unresolved, as if the speaker themselves is unsure of their own meaning. The silence that follows is thick, heavy with implication. Someone invisible. The phrase is said softly, almost as a confession to no one in particular. Lucian stands rigid in his estate as a disembodied voice cuts through the air, its tone sibilant and cold. Your continued behavior is garnering a lot of interest at court.
Tell her I'm getting sick of cleaning up the trash she dumps on my borders.
She sets them loose as gifts, and reminders of what will happen if she catches you trying to break the terms of. Fair paints a portrait of the Ator, a creature with wings that seem to pulse with an unnatural light. As I painted it, I could have sworn that I could smell breath that reeked of carrion, that the air beneath its wings whispered promises of death. The finished product was chilling enough that I had to set aside the painting in the back of the room and go try to persuade Aliz to let me help with the fire night food preparations in the kitchen. Anything to avoid going into the garden, where the Ator might appear. The day of fire night, Kalanmai, Tamlin had called it, dawned, and I didn't see Tamlin or Lucian all day. As the afternoon shifted into dusk, I found myself again at the main crossroads of the house. The absence of Tamlin and Lucian casts a lingering unease, the air thick with unanswered questions. Fair moves through the spring court, her eyes scanning the empty halls where servants should be present. None of the bird-faced servants were to be found. The absence unsettles her, a silent warning of the court's hidden dangers. The kitchen was empty of staff, and the food they'd been preparing for 2 days. The sound of drums issued. The drum beats came from far away, beyond the garden, past the game park, into the forest that lay beyond. Not invited, I reminded myself. Not invited to whatever party had all the kitchen fairies tittering and laughing among one another. The drums turned faster, louder. Fair stands at the threshold of the hall, her nose prickling with the metallic tang of magic. The setting sun stains the tiles a tangerine hue, and her shadow pulses to the rhythm of distant drums. Where are you going?
It's Calamite, I have to go.
Feyre stands in a shadowed chamber as distant drums echo through the night, her heart pounding in sync with the rhythm outside.
As a High Lord, I have to partake in the great rite.
Why?
Go to your chamber, lock your doors, set up a snare, whatever you do.
Why? Feyre's mind flashes to Tamlin's earlier words about a fairy ritual, but the details remain elusive as he turns away, his green eyes obscured by a gilded mask. From the weapons, it had to be brutal and violent, especially if Tamlin's beast form wasn't weapon enough.
Just do it. Don't come out until morning.
Stronger, faster, the drums beat, and the muscles in Tamlin's neck quivered, as if standing still were somehow painful to him. Are you going into battle?
He lifted a hand as if to touch my arm, but he lowered it before his fingers could graze the fabric of my tunic.
Feyre stands alone in her chamber as the storm rages outside, the distant glow of bonfires flickering through the darkening sky.
Stay in your chamber, Feyre.
But She locks herself in without realizing she hasn't eaten, pacing as the sound of drums and fires fills the night. I did as he commanded, though I soon realized that I'd locked myself in my room without having eaten dinner. A wild, wicked voice weaves between drumbeats, whispering commands. Go, it urges, tugging at Feyre's resolve. Go, that voice whispered otherwise. Feyre's determination cracks under pressure. By 10 o'clock, I could no longer stand it, she admits, her resolve hardening. By 10 o'clock, I could no longer stand it. She follows the drums, her white mare obeying instinct as they ascend the foothills toward a bonfire shrouded in smoke and magic. Concealed in her hooded cloak, Feyre approaches the bonfire, her breath visible in the thick, enchanted air. Feyre observes a gathering of high fae at the spring court, their features obscured by masks that warp her vision with magic. I couldn't discern any of their features beyond the various masks they wore. Despite the glamour blurring their identities, Feyre feels an irresistible pull from the drums echoing through the night. I would have been furious, would have considered going back to the manor, had the drums not echoed through my bones. Feyre approaches a clandestine fae gathering in the hills, her human scent masked by smoke and incense as she clutches her knives for protection. I prayed that the smoke and countless scents of various high fae and fairies were enough to cover my human smell. But I checked to ensure that my 2 knives were still at my sides anyway as I moved deeper into the celebration. She nearly loses her balance on the steep bank leading to the cave, where firelight dances on the walls of a hidden chamber. I almost slid down the steep bank as I entered the hollow. Curiosity overtakes her nervousness as she observes the swaying high fae, questioning her outsider status at the ritual. I watched them sway, then shifted on my feet. I'd been banned from this. They remained along the path, more and more of them coming each minute. Feyre approaches a bonfire near the trees, observing the fairies as she prepares to ask about the ritual. A tall, lean fairy with cruel eyes seizes her arm, spinning her around to face 3 masked strangers. Just some fire night fun. Get your hands off me. They were strong hands, warm and broad. Not at all like the prodding, bony fingers of the 3 fairies, who went utterly still as whoever caught me gently set me upright. The fairies' rigid postures betrayed their fear, their wings twitching but held in check by the unseen force of the stranger's presence. There you are. The scene opens with an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere as an unnamed figure circles Feyre, his presence tinged with supernatural mystery. Strange for a mortal to be friends with 2 fairies, he mused, and began circling me. I could have sworn tendrils of star-kissed night trailed in his wake. Feyre stands motionless, her unease slowly giving way to a sense of awe as the stranger's words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. At a bonfire under the twilight sky, a tense confrontation unfolds as 2 figures stand face to face, their voices cutting through the silence.
Aren't humans usually terrified of us?
I've known them my whole life. Fear doesn't define them, it only makes them stronger.
And yet they brought you to the great rite and abandoned you.
Jane realizes she has given herself away, spotting the servants hauling off the food, but hesitating to confirm its absence. I'm afraid the refreshments are a long way off, he said, coming closer now, It might be a while before they return. Jane's warning bells ring louder as she studies Mr. Hale's face. Handsome, but unreadable, his tone calm yet laced with something unspoken. Mr. X removes a hand from his pocket to offer his arm, his posture polite but tinged with confusion. May I escort you somewhere in the meantime? No, I said, my tongue thick and heavy. He waved his hand toward the hollow toward the drums. Enjoy the ride then, try to stay out of trouble. His eyes gleamed in a way that suggested staying out of trouble meant staying far, far away from him. So you're not a part of the spring court. Do I look like I'm part of the spring court? He gestured to his face, where a mask might go. And glad of it. The metaphor of the mask lingers, suggesting hidden emotions and unspoken vulnerability. Why are you here then? Because all the monsters have been let out of their cages tonight, no matter what court they belong to. So I may roam wherever I wish until the dawn. Enjoy the rite. The scene opens in a fairy gathering, where masked and unmasked fae mingle under an air of intrigue and tension. Most of them still wore masks, but there were some, like that lethal stranger and those 3 horrible fairies, who wore no masks at all, either fairies with no allegiance or members of other courts. I couldn't tell them apart. As Feyre scans the crowd, her gaze locks with that of a masked fairy across the path, setting the stage for an uncertain encounter.
Have you lost your senses?
None of the fairies noticed us. They were all staring intensely down the path, away from the cave. I wanted to.
Idiot.
Without further word, he slung her over his shoulder as if she were a sack of potatoes.
Useless human fool.
Feyre's eyes widen in shock, her body tensing as she's lifted like an object rather than a person. Despite my wriggling and shouts of protest, despite my demands that he get my horse, he held firm, and when I looked up, I found that he was running. Fast. Faster than anything should be able to move.
You stupid mortal, didn't he tell you to stay in your room?
So what? I said, shouting as well. I hated feeling like a disobedient child. Feyre's back arches slightly as his hot breath tickles her ear, her knees buckling under the weight of his release. She clutches the wall to steady herself, torn between striking him and surrendering to the pull of his touch. And I would have taken a very, very long time, Feyre. He said my name like a caress. Why should I want someone's leftovers? She snaps, pushing against his grip as he bites her neck, her body betraying her with a moan of surrender. Don't ever disobey me again, he purrs, his voice a low rumble that vibrates through her, even as her hand slaps his face in defiance. Feyre strides into the dining room, her anger evident as she confronts Tamlin and Lucien over a bruise on her neck. Fairy pig.
I bit her.
Feyre later calms, reflecting on the tense meal and Tamlin's reluctant apology. It's just a dress. Don't know if I should be pleased or worried. I didn't have the courage to look at the mirror as she fussed over me. I made a choice to come here, and my kin thought me mad. But my sister and her mate had been killed, and for her boys. I had to keep my hands clenched at my sides to avoid wiping my sweaty palms on the skirts of my gown. Tamlin and Lucien's conversation halts as the Enna character approaches the dining hall table, their movements deliberate and tense. Whatever discussion Tamlin and Lucien had been having stopped, and I tried not to look at their wide eyes as I strode to my usual place at the end of the table. The sudden pause in their exchange, paired with the Enna character's forced composure, underscores the unspoken tension and impending conflict. Feyre gestures to the vast table between her and Tamlin, her voice tinged with nervousness. You're so far away.
He smirks, his tone confident as he explains the magic. Think of it as a broom closet tucked between pockets of the world. His voice softens, sincere as he looks at her. You do look beautiful.
Feyre observes her reflection, noting the softness in her features and the light that has entered her eyes. Her own, not her mother's or Nesta's.
I mean it, he added when my mouth twisted to the side.
Didn't you look in the mirror? I have something for you.
That was your forest where you hunted.
It was the only escape I had. Tamlin stands before a painting depicting men with bloodied fists and a curled figure on the floor, his leg broken. He swears, you were there when they wrecked your father's leg. Tell me there's some way to help you.
It's my burden to bear.
It was just a grassy glen watched over by a weeping willow with a clear brook running through it. We lounged in comfortable silence, and I glanced at Tamlin, who dozed beside me.
The what of what?
I suppose it sings war camp limericks, too.
You're human.
Every gift comes with a price. A kiss. Magic, everything was magic, and it broke my heart. Feyre stands in a forest clearing, her voice trembling as she asks Tamlin, "Why can't I see you anymore?"
Because I willed my glamour back into place.
Feyre's eyes glisten as she whispers, "I just want to know what you look like."
What about my kiss?
There's your kiss. Tamlin laughs, but Feyre's exhaustion overtakes her as she curls into sleep, the willow's song lulling her under. Where es Alize? Are you out of your right mind? Tamlin must have carried me up here, must have carried me the whole way home. I am Alize. It was impossible. The Alize I knew was fair and plump and looked like a high fae. I rubbed my eyes with my thumb and forefinger. A glamour, that's what Tamlin had said he wore. His fairy sight had stripped away the glamours I'd been seeing. Tamlin's demeanor shifted from enigmatic to resolute as the truth of his glamour became clear. Feyre stands in the High Lord's study, her voice trembling as she asks, "But why bother to glamour everything?" She turns to Tamlin, her vulnerability raw as she admits, "Because I'd been a cowering human, that's why." Tamlin's silence lingers as Feyre explains, "Because Tamlin knew I would have locked myself in this room and never come out if I'd seen them all for their true selves." The hallways were bustling with masked fairies I'd never seen before. Some were tall and humanoid, high fae like Tamlin, others were not. Fairies. I tried to avoid looking at those ones, as they seemed the most surprised to notice my attention. I was almost shaking by the time I reached the dining room. Lucien, mercifully, appeared like Lucien. I didn't ask whether that was because Tamlin had informed him to put up a better glamour, or because he didn't bother trying to be something he was. Tamlin lounged in his usual chair, but straightened as I lingered in the doorway. Feyre steps into her bedroom, her voice tinged with confusion as she asks, "What's wrong?"
He smirks, his tone laced with amusement. They've been here all along. He twirls a dagger, his voice dripping with smug certainty. We made sure you couldn't see or hear anyone but those who were necessary.
Feyre tiptoes past fairies, mortified by her failure to see illusions, and confronts Tamlin. His lips twitch with amusement as he nods. "It was a valiant effort," he says, though his eyes betray hidden concern.
It was a valiant effort.
Feyre insists she saw the Naga, Puka, and Suriel, asking why the glamour didn't hide them. Tamlin's voice darkens. "They're not members of my court. The Puka belongs to the wind, and the Naga to someone else," he says, his tone guarded.
If I offer you the moon on a string, will you give me a kiss too? It'll be fine, he says, his voice soft but firm as he avoids Feyre's gaze and stares at the window, his fingers running through his hair.
Feyre presses Tamlin about the Ator, and he admits he cast a glamour to hide her. "The blight is acting up again," he warns, his voice heavy. "If you spot one, don't talk to it," he urges, his reassurance laced with unspoken fear. I didn't know where I went as I stared at that still screaming head, the brown eyes bulging, the teeth broken and bloody.
It's me. They branded him behind the ear with a sigil, a mountain with 3 stars.
Lucien splashed out of the fountain, but Feyre couldn't look at him, not with the head he bore, the blood surely on his hands and clothes.
You're still safe.
Their idea of jokes must have been even more horrible when we were enslaved to you all.
Some days I'm very glad I was still a child when my father sent his slaves south of the wall. What I witnessed then was bad enough.
You're not your father, Tamlin, or your brothers. The scene begins with an internal reflection, capturing a moment of inner turmoil and resolve. I knew I was headed down a path that would likely end in my mortal heart being left in pieces, and yet I couldn't stop myself. The reflection shifts to a contrast between despair and the unexpected beauty of the garden, symbolizing hope amid uncertainty. On the distant hills, I spied the makings of fires and maypoles being raised. When I asked Alize, whose people I'd learned were called the Urisk, she simply said, "Summer solstice. The main celebration used to be at the summer court, but things are different. So now we have one here too. You're going. What were they doing with themselves? Feyre stands at the edge of a bonfire ring, her shoes lost, as the sky swirls with molten amethyst and ruby. She sways, entranced by the fairies dancing freely around the flames.
Damn it, Feyre, do you want me to kill myself trying to keep you from impaling your mortal hide on another rock? Idiot, drunken idiot.
Feyre feels the music pulse around her, describing it as a living, breathing thing of wonder and joy and beauty, as she sways to its rhythm.
Feyre, stop, Lucian said and grabbed me again.
You stop being so serious, I said, shaking him off. I wasn't fairy, but I was a part of this earth, and the earth was a part of me, and I would be content to dance upon it for the rest of my life.
I'll look after her.
I don't need a keeper. Feyre moves across the hilltop meadow, her body swaying to the music as Tamlin's fiddle fills the night air.
Dance, Feyre.
She twirls, her senses overwhelmed by the music and Tamlin's presence, until he sweeps her into his arms.
I want to show you something better.
Feyre hesitates as the dancers behind them begin to gather, but Tamlin leads her away from the firelight. They're starting again. The will-o'-the-wisps waltzed across the spirit-riddled field, their ghostly forms glowing under the moonlight as they sang in call and response.
Dance with me, Feyre.
Then do it. Tamlin's fingers tightened at her lower back as he pulled her close, their bodies pressing together under the fading light of the solstice.
I'm thinking I might kiss you.
That's it. Feyre's hands tightened around Tamlin's neck as she pulled him closer, pressing herself against him. His hands roamed her back, tangling in her hair and gripping her waist as if he could never touch her enough.
Come, he said, kissing my brow. We'll miss it if we don't go now.
Better than will-o'-the-wisps? I asked, but he kissed my cheeks, my neck, and finally my lips. I followed him into the trees, through the ever-lightening world. You bit my neck on fire, night. If I can face you after that, a few kisses are nothing.
Nothing. I'm trying to eat.
The smile instantly faded from Tamlin's face.
The blight, Lucian said tightly, softly. It took out 24 of their younglings, 24 all gone, he swallowed.
Feyre's voice trembles as she asks, the blight can truly kill people. Her hands clutch the table edge, eyes wide with terror. The blight can truly kill people. Tamlin's claws unsheathe as he snarls at the doorway, his voice low and urgent. Get Feyre to the window, by the curtains, he growls at Lucian.
Get Feyre to the window, by the curtains.
Feyre snatches a knife from the table, her panic evident as Lucian pulls her toward the window. I snatched one of the knives off the table, she mutters. I snatched one of the knives off the table. The tang of magic shoved itself up my nostrils. But someone was coming, someone awful enough to frighten them, someone who would want to hurt me if they knew I was here. The hissing voice of the Ator slithered through my memory. There were worse creatures than it, Tamlin had told me, worse than the Naga and the Suriel and the Bog, too. Footsteps sounded from the hall, even, strolling, casual. I'd met him before. He'd saved me from those 3 fairies on Fire Night.
What do you want, Rysand? Rysand, come now, Tamlin, I don't see you for 49 years and you start calling me Rysand. Only my prisoners and my enemies call me that. Go to hell, Rhys.
Rysand turned, and I held my breath as he ran an eye over Lucian.
A fox mask, appropriate for you, Lucian.
Tamlin remained seated. With his back to me, I couldn't see his face, but Tamlin's voice was laced with the promise of violence.
We were in the middle of lunch. Stimulating.
Rysand approached Tamlin, each movement smooth as silk. Tamlin stands rigid as Lucian's voice slithers through the tension, his words laced with mockery.
What a pity that you must endure the brunt of it, Tamlin, and an even greater pity that you're so resigned to your fate.
Tamlin's jaw tightens, his usual composure cracking as Lucian's barbs land.
You might be stubborn, but this is pathetic. How different the High Lord is from the brutal warband leader of centuries ago.
The air thrums with unspoken history as Tamlin's defiance begins to rise. Lucian sneers at the unnamed character, his voice edged with contempt as he accuses them of being Amarantha's servant.
You're just Amarantha's whore.
Her whore I might be, but not without my reasons. Rysand's mocking tone, cuts through the tension as he addresses Lucian with condescension.
Is that any way to speak to a High Lord of Prythian?
The unnamed character's defiance is met with Lucian's raised sword and a warning about their past. I tried not to breathe too loudly. Rysand, he'd been the one to send that head, as a gift.
Shouldn't you reprimand your lackey for speaking to me like that? I don't enforce rank in my court. Amarantha's bed is growing cold.
Feyre flinches at the thought of Amarantha's presence in the night court. I flinched. Was the night court where this woman, this Amarantha, was located too? Rysand snickered, but then he was upon Lucian, too fast for me to follow with my human eyes, growling in his face. Lucian pressed me into the wall with his back, hard enough that I stifled a cry as I was squished against the wood.
I was slaughtering on the battlefield before you were even born.
No, I would never dare to paint that dark, immortal grace, not in 100 years. Rhys stuffed his hands into his pockets and said, "Besides, who do you think taught your beloved Tamlin the finer aspects of swords and females? You can't truly believe he learned everything in his father's little war camps."
Save it for another time, Rhys. You'll see me soon enough.
Tamlin rubbed his temples, his expression strained. Lucian's breath hitched as Rysand passed the table. The High Lord of the Night Court ran a finger along the back of my chair, a casual gesture.
She's already preparing for you. Given your current state, I think I can safely report that you've already been broken and will reconsider her offer. I'm looking forward to seeing your face when you...
Lucian went stick straight, pressing Feyre harder against the wall. The table was still set for 3, her half-eaten plate of food sitting right before him.
Where's your guest? I sent them off when I sensed your arrival.
Magic seared my nostrils, and I stared at Rysand in undiluted terror as his face contorted with rage.
You dare glamour me.
Tamlin's chair groaned as it was shoved back. He rose, claws at the ready, deadlier than any of the knives strapped to him.
I knew you liked to stoop low with your lovers, Lucian, but I never thought you'd actually dabble with mortal trash. Put your sword down, Lucian.
Rysand brushed Lucian aside as if he were a curtain. There was nothing between us now, and the air was sharp and cold. Feyre trembled, unable to find words or courage as the invisible force seized control of her body. "Oh, she doesn't know, does she?" Tamlin's voice was sharp with warning as he bristled with panic. "You have seconds, Rhys. Seconds to get out."
Let her go.
Rysand's mocking tone curled around Feyre's exposed throat as he taunted her with her own private thoughts.
I'd forgotten that human minds are as easy to shatter as eggshells.
I sank to the floor, curling over my knees as I reeled in everything that I was, as I tried to keep from sobbing, from screaming, from emptying my stomach onto the floor.
Amarantha will enjoy breaking her, almost as much as she'll enjoy watching you as she shatters her bit by bit.
Tamlin was frozen, his arms, his claws, hanging limply at his side. Feyre stands at the threshold of the Great Hall, her hands clenched at her sides as she weighs her next move. I didn't go to dinner. The unspoken tension between her and Tamlin thickens, the air heavy with the weight of unacknowledged betrayal. Feyre hesitates in the unfamiliar space, her fingers curling into her palms as she avoids acknowledging the presence of a dining room. I didn't want to know if there was a dining room to eat in. And I couldn't bring myself to paint. The house had been quiet for some time now, but the ripples of Tamlin's rage echoed through it, reverberating in the wood and stone and glass. Tamlin shut the door and approached Feyre's bed, his steps slow and heavy as he finally spoke.
I'm sorry.
"It's fine."
It's not fine.
Tamlin grabbed Feyre's hand, wrenching her fingers from the sheets as he struggled to explain.
I'm sending you home, Feyre.
"What?
I'm sending you home.
Did I do something wrong?
You did nothing wrong. You were perfect.
Then why do I have to go?"
Because there are people who would hurt you, I can't protect you anymore.
"It wasn't my home, it was hell. I want to stay with you," I whispered, my voice breaking.
Treaty or no treaty, blight or no blight, I said, my voice shaking with restrained fury.
"Let me help you." "No," he snarled, pacing before the bed. "Did you read between the lines today?" "So you're sending me away because I'm useless in a fight?" I challenged, crossing my arms.
I'm sending you away because it makes me sick thinking about you in their hands.
How long do I have to go away for?" I asked, my voice trembling.
I don't know, he said, his hands pressing into his eyes as if to crush the answer.
But not forever, right? I murmured, my fingers tracing the edge of his mask. Who wants someone around who's so covered in thorns?
Thorns, he repeated, his voice softening.
Thorny, prickly, sour. Contrary, I said, my voice brittle with unshed tears.
Not forever, he whispered, kissing my mouth gently.
I kissed him back, my hands gripping his hair as if holding on to him might keep me from leaving. His hands burned through my nightgown, and I arched into him, my world narrowing to the press of his lips and the weight of his body. Even as his magic twisted through me, I clung to him, as if love alone could defy the blight and the monsters it had summoned. The scene unfolds in a charged moment of physical intimacy, marked by unspoken boundaries and shifting emotions between the protagonist and their love interest. He breathed my name onto my chest, one of his hands exploring the plane of my torso, rising up to the slope of my breast. He hesitated at the sound, pulling back slightly. Fair bites Tamlin's lip in a silent command, his growl vibrating into her mouth as he tears through her clothing with a single claw. "Don't stop," she gasps, her voice raw with need as she pulls him closer, her body yielding completely to the wildness between them.
If we keep going, I won't be able to stop at all, he murmurs, his brow resting between her breasts as he shudders, his voice thick with conflict.
I was somewhat surprised when Ali's clothed me in an outfit very unlike my usual garb, frilly and confining and binding in all the wrong places. Some mortal fashion among the wealthy, no doubt. I don't like goodbyes. If I could, I'd just walk out and not say anything. Make the most of your freedom.
Those clothes are enough to convince me I never want to enter the human realm.
I'm not sure the human realm would know what to do with you.
You're not even going to give her a few more days, just a few, before you send her back to that human cesspit. This isn't up for debate.
Lucian stared him down for a moment, spat on the ground, and stormed up the stairs. Tamlin didn't reprimand him. My chest hollowed out as I faced Tamlin in front of the gilded carriage.
The mortal realm remains safe for you, for your family.
Had he meant what I thought he'd said last night, that he loved me? Fair stands at the edge of the opulent carriage, her voice trembling as she says, "My paintings, they're yours," the words spilling out as she grapples with the terror of being sent away. He lifts her chin with a finger, his tone steady. "I will see you again." He kisses her, then pulls away too quickly. "I love you, Fair." She turns, fighting tears, but he is there to help her into the carriage. "Ready?" he asks, his face a mask of calm. She nods, though she whispers, No, I wasn't ready," her voice breaking. Tamlin shut the door, sealing Fair inside with a click that sounded through her. He leaned through the open window to caress her cheek, and she could have sworn that she felt her heart crack.
I love you.
Fair bit her lip to keep it from wobbling. I would not become a burden to him. I would not become another weight pressing upon his shoulders. Fair steps through the manor gates into the forest, her resolve firm as she leaves behind the world she knew. And I did not look back as we passed through the manor gates and into the forest beyond. Almost as soon as the carriage entered the woods, the sparkle of magic stuffed itself up my nose, and I was dragged into a deep sleep. The room is silent, except for the thunderous clopping of hooves against the flagstone path outside the window. I was furious when I jerked awake, wondering why it had been at all necessary, but the air was full of the thunderous clopping of hooves against a flagstone path. Rubbing my eyes, I peered out the window to see a sloping drive lined with conical hedges and irises. I had never been here before. Fair steps out of the gilded carriage, observing the servants, stunned reaction as she contrasts the human's demeanor with the poised high fae. "Welcome to our home," Nesta says flatly, her eyes on the ground. I let out a stark laugh. "Nesta," I said, and she went rigid. I laughed again, Fair replies, her tone sharp with unspoken tension. "You should come with me. I think I'd like to see the continent." It was ash in my mouth, compared to what I'd consumed in Prithian. "And I'm surprised you don't have a line of suitors out the door, begging for your hand." Elaine flushed, but plunged her little shovel into the ground to dig out a weed. "Yes, well, there will always be other seasons. Nesta won't tell you, but this season was somewhat strange." "In what way?" "No, but it made me wish for those years again, even with the hunger and cold. She looked over her shoulder to where my eldest sister stood by a gnarled mulberry tree, looking out over the flat expanse of our lands. Nesta didn't finish the season. A growing distance manifests between two figures, marked by unspoken tensions and withheld truths. She wouldn't tell me why. She began refusing every invitation. Elaine sits in her home, her hands clenched as she watches her sister's unsettling gaze fall on visiting friends. She hardly talks to anyone, and I feel wretched when my friends pay a visit, because she makes them so uncomfortable when she stares at them in that way of hers. Elaine exhales sharply, her shoulders slumping as the weight of her sister's presence crushes the fragile warmth of the gathering. Maybe you could talk to her. She went to see you, you know. I dreaded the day it would forever fade. I marveled at it, actually, that those years of poverty hadn't stripped away that light from Elaine. I found myself proud to call sister. I savored hearing the wind in the trees and the sighing of the high grasses. If I drifted far enough into my memories, I could almost feel the warmth of Tamlin's presence beside me, walking the familiar path to the cottage. I love you. Even worse than my disappointment was the creeping, nagging fear that he was in danger. I firmly but politely refused to fall into conversation with them, to give them anything to gossip over. Why had Nesta changed her mind? His eyes roving freely over my body, with a half-smile I'd seen him give to the village girls 100 times before. Tamlin sits in solitude, his expression pensive as he reflects on his father's character. His voice is steady, but the weight of his thoughts is evident in the pause before he speaks.
Tamlin had been wrong when we discussed whether my father would have ever come after me. He didn't possess the courage, the anger. If anything, he would have hired someone to do it for him.
Nesta had gone with that mercenary. What happened to Tomas Mandre? I asked, the words strangled. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension and unresolved grief. I realized he wouldn't have gone with me to save you from Prithian. Tomas never deserved you anyway. A light shone in her blue-gray eyes. And he had not forgotten it. My stomach turned over, and I fought against the nausea that roiled within me. Fair. Fair grips the table, her voice steady but laced with guilt as she warns her family of unseen dangers in Prithian. Everything I have told you must remain a secret. Her father recoils, his face pale as he stammers in disbelief at the revelation. Prithian. Fair rises, her resolve hardening as she commands her family to flee if danger approaches. The first sign of danger, the first rumor you hear of the wall being breached or even something being strange, you get on a ship and go. The speaker instructs them to sail south, prompting confusion from father and Elaine as they blink, as if emerging from a deep sleep. You sail far away, as far south as you can get, to some place the fairies would never desire. The Bedors, that was meant to be us. Fair and Nesta prepare for the impending threat, with Nesta helping Fair change into battle-ready clothing while discussing the Blight's approach. We don't need you here, Fair. Do not look back. Take my money and buy a damned grove of it for Elaine to tend. The High Lord stands in stark contrast to the protagonist, his calm demeanor masking a growing skepticism as their confrontation escalates. What do you think you can even do to help? He's a High Lord, you're just a human. I don't care. Nesta remained in the room. She would not say goodbye, she hated farewells as much as the speaker did. There is a better world, Nesta. There is a better world out there, waiting for you to find it. Don't bother, I don't think I'd be particularly fond of fairies. Elaine threw her arms around Fair, her voice trembling as she whispered. I remember all of it now. Maybe someday. Fair rides north through the summer forest, her resolve unshaken as she prepares to confront Tamlin. She stops only when darkness obscures her path. I had to get back, had to see what had happened, had to tell Tamlin everything that was in my heart before it was too late. As she presses onward, the forest's usual hum fades into an unnatural silence that tightens around her. On and on through the summer forest, lush and dense and humming, until an absolute silence fell. I slowed my horse to a careful walk and scanned the brush and trees ahead for any sign, any ripple. There, cleaving through the forest, was an invisible wall. She led her horse down the line, tapping the wall every so often to make sure she hadn't veered away. It took me 2 days, and the night between them was more terrifying than any I'd experienced at the spring court. Magic stung my nostrils, zapping until my horse bucked again, but we were through. I knew these trees. I rode in silence, an arrow nocked and ready, the threats lurking in the forest far greater than those in the woods I'd just left. Tamlin might be furious. He might command me to turn around and go home. But I would tell him that I was going to help, tell him that I loved him and would fight for him however I could, even if I had to tie him down to make him listen. By the time I reached the gates, my mouth had gone dry. The gates were open, but the iron had been bent out of shape, as if mighty hands had wrenched them apart. Tam. Empty, it was utterly empty here, like a tomb. Tapestries hung in shreds, the marble banister was fractured, and the chandeliers lay broken on the ground, reduced to mounds of shattered crystal. Tamlin, I shouted, nothing. The windows had all been blown out. Fair kneels in the wreckage of the entry hall, taking a moment to steady herself before rising carefully to her feet. Another forest, I told myself, another set of tracks. She traces the bloodstains and shattered glass, noting the signs of a violent struggle that had left the house in disarray. Fair stands before the dining room doors, her hands trembling as she forces herself to breathe through the suffocating fear gripping her chest. No bodies, I kept repeating to myself. There were no bodies and not much gore. They had to be alive. Tamlin had to be alive. She presses her palms against her face, her breath coming in unsteady gasps as she stares at the splintered doors, refusing to accept the possibility of Tamlin's death. I couldn't tell if the damage was from his lashing out after Rysen's arrival the day before my departure, or if someone else had caused it. The giant table was in pieces, the windows smashed, the curtains in shreds. But no blood, there was no blood here. I studied the trail across the floor. It had been disturbed, but I could make out 2 sets, large and side by side, leading from where the table had been. As if Tamlin and Lucian had been sitting in here as the attack happened, and walked out without a fight. The dining room was in disarray, with shards of glass and bloodstains scattered across the floor. If I was right, then they were alive. Debris crunched from down the hall. I drew my hunting knife and ducked farther into the dining room, scanning for a place to hide. Something limped into the room and sniffed. Fair crouched in the shadows of the dining room, her breath shallow as she watched the cloaked figure approach. The figure sniffed the air, and Fair's mind raced, calculating every possible escape. The figure turned slightly, and Fair's heart pounded. She dared a glance, searching for a weakness, a spot for her knife, before shouting into the silence. Ali's. Fair stood in the manor kitchen, her knife and bow visible as Ali's blocked her path. The room was scorched, reduced to cinders and blackened stone. You can't be here. Fair's voice trembled as she demanded, Is he alive? Ali's hesitated, her tree bark skin bleaching birch white. Yes, but... Fair's knees buckled with relief. And Lucian, she pressed, her voice urgent. She took him. Fair's blood turned cold. Who? Amarantha, she whispered, the name hanging in the air like a curse. You want the truth, girl. Ali's shuddered, her hands gripping her mask as if it might shatter. The kitchen remained silent, save for the crackle of embers. In the pantry of the spring court, Ali's confronts Fair with a bitter revelation about Tamlin's past. You could have been the one to free him and his power, had you not been so blind to your own heart. I didn't know. Tamlin and Amarantha knew each other before. His family had long been tied to Hybern. She refused, and Lucian told her to go back to the shithole she'd crawled out of. She took his eye as punishment, carved it out with her own fingernail, then scarred his face. She sent him back so bloody that Tamlin, the High Lord, vomited when he saw his friend. I couldn't let myself imagine what state Lucian had been in then, if it had made Tamlin sick. Ali's tapped on her mask, the metal pinging beneath her nails. I pressed my hands against the stone wall behind me, savoring its coolness, its steadiness. When all were assembled, she claimed that peace could be had if Tamlin joined her as her lover and consort. But when she tried to touch him, he refused to let her near. You can guess how well that went over with Amarantha. He spat in her face and she laughed. She said he had 7 times 7 years before she claimed him, before he had to join her under the mountain. If he wanted to break her curse, he need only find a human girl willing to marry him. But not any girl, a human with ice in her heart, with hatred for our kind. A human girl willing to kill a fairy. The ground rocked beneath me, and I was grateful for the wall I leaned against. The treaty. It was all a cruel joke, a clever punishment to Amarantha. You humans loathe and fear fairies so much it would be impossible. Impossible for the same girl who slaughtered a fairy in cold blood to then fall in love with one. Feyre stands in the room, her hands trembling as she recalls the binding spell that silenced the Fae. Tamlin's men were sent daily across the wall, but their efforts were futile. That I can tell you now, it means the game is over to her. Feyre pockets the knife, her voice steady as she reveals the truth. The lies about the blight, that was the best he could do, the best we could all do. Show me the way. No, go home. I don't believe in fate. I must have turned pale because she pursed her lips and patted me on the shoulder. A few rules to remember, girl, she said, and we both stared at the cave mouth. The darkness reeked from its maw to poison the fresh night air. All dark and miserable roads lead under the mountain, Alice said so quietly that her voice was nothing more than the rustling of leaves. She pointed to the cave. It's an ancient shortcut, once considered sacred, but no more. I will free him. You'll be lucky if she gives you a clean death. You'll be lucky if you even get brought before her. I must have turned pale because she pursed her lips and patted me on the shoulder. A few rules to remember, girl, she said, and we both stared at the cave mouth. Don't trust a soul in there, not even your Tamlin. Your senses are your greatest enemies. They will be waiting to betray you. No, I admitted. Alice hesitates, her voice trembling as she reveals a fragment of the curse's hidden truth. There was one part of the curse, one part we can't tell you. Even now, my bones are crying out just for mentioning it. Feyre grips Alice's arm, her gratitude mingling with resolve as she prepares for the perilous mission ahead. I will, thank you for bringing me. Alice offers a reluctant farewell, her words laced with unspoken fear for Feyre's survival. I'll wish you luck nonetheless. Feyre instructs Alice on a potential escape route, her voice steady despite the weight of the task ahead. Once you retrieve them, if you and your nephews need somewhere to flee, cross the wall. Go to my family's house. Alice patted Feyre's hand and said, Ask for Nesta, my eldest sister. She knows who you are, knows everything. She will shelter you in any way she can. Feyre looked at Alice one last time, then at the night sky and the deep green of the hills, the color of Tamlin's eyes. Alice whispered, Stay alive, as Feyre stepped into the cave, her breath shallow and boots crunching on stone. The passage opened onto a crudely carved, firelit subterranean passageway. I lingered in the shadows, my heart wild in my chest. The air was thick with tension, the flickering flames casting jagged shadows against the stone walls. The crack in the cave wall was large enough for one person to squeeze through, so jagged and rough that it was obviously not often used. No tracks or signs of recent passage marked the dirt. The hallway beyond was clear, but it veered off, obscuring the view. The passage was deathly quiet, though the protagonist remembered Alice's warning and did not trust their ears, knowing fairies could be silent as cats. Still, I had to leave this cave. Tamlin had been here for weeks already. I had to find where Amarantha kept him, and hopefully not run into anyone in the process. Killing animals and the Naga had been one thing, but killing any others. I took several deep breaths, bracing myself. It was the same as hunting. Only this time the animals were fairies. Fairies who could torture me endlessly, torture me until I begged for death. Torture me the way they tormented that summer court fairy, whose wings had been ripped off. The memory lingers, a visceral reminder of the Fae's capacity for cruelty and the protagonist's harrowing vulnerability. Feyre moves through a narrow hidden passage in Amarantha's court, her body tense as she avoids looking at the grotesque, bleeding stumps ahead. I didn't let myself think about those bleeding stumps as I eased toward the tiny opening. She presses into an alcove, her breath shallow, and glances cautiously around the corner at a torchlit hallway stretching into darkness. This was a mistake, only an idiot would come here. Her fingers curl into the stone wall as she lingers, frustration burning in her chest at the lack of information Ali's provided. I should have been smart enough to ask, or smart enough to think of another way, any way but this. She risks another peek, her stomach churning at the endless, pale stone corridor that could lead anywhere within Amarantha's cursed domain. The hallway stretches wide and open, offering no shadows for concealment. The narrator's movements are careful, but their exposure feels inevitable, like a starving doe tearing bark from a tree in a clearing. The silence of the halls is absolute, earlier voices have vanished. A sprint back to the cave mouth is an option, but the narrator hesitates, weighing reconnaissance against the risk of losing their chance. They resolve, no, a second opportunity might not arise for a while. Their determination hardens, even as the tension of the moment clings to the air. Then I looked to the black rock thrown beside her, and my arms buckled beneath me. He was still wearing that golden mask, and no weapons hung from his belt. His eyes were dark and unblinking, and he did not move, did not speak. I felt my stomach turn, a cold knot of fear tightening in my chest. Amarantha's voice lilts as she examines a chain dangling from Feyre's neck, her smile venomous. The chain bears a single, age-worn bone. "What's this?" A tor hisses, revealing a forked tongue as it flaps its wings, sending a wave of foul-smelling air toward Feyre. "Just a human thing I found downstairs." "Obviously." Tamlin stands 10 feet away, silent and motionless, his boots the only focus of Feyre's wide-eyed gaze. "Tell Her Majesty, you human filth." Feyre eased to her feet, hands hovering near her daggers as she avoided Amarantha's gaze. "I came to claim the one I love," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Oh," Amarantha leaned forward, her golden gown shimmering. "You let me torture that innocent girl to keep this one safe? You lovely thing, you actually made a human worm love you. Marvelous," she clapped, her laughter sharp and cruel. Feyre's jaw tightened. "You tricked him, he is bound unfairly," she declared, her words cutting through the court's silence as Tamlin's stillness betrayed the storm raging inside him. In the cavern, Amarantha points behind Feyre, her hideous eye ring gleaming as she taunts the protagonist with a chilling question. "But I'm curious, what eloquence will pour from your lips when you behold what you should have been?" Feyre turns to see a mangled corpse nailed to the cavern wall, its burned and disfigured body a grotesque testament to Amarantha's cruelty, as the antagonist coldly muses, "Perhaps I should have listened when she said she'd never seen Tamlin before. I should thank you for giving Rhysand her name instead of yours." This was where they'd taken her, what they'd done to her after they burned her family alive in their house. I'd saved my own life and damned her. "Yes." Amarantha leaned back in her throne, her voice laced with mockery as she addressed Tamlin. "Could it be that you, despite your words so many years ago, return the human's feelings?"
I've never seen her before, someone must have glamored her as a joke, probably Rysand.
"A pity your human whore on the side never bothered to save you, though." A human figure stands tense as Ali's, a servant of the Spring Court, proposes a bargain to prove their loyalty to Tamlin. The human's anxiety is palpable as they speak. Well, as it happens, I'm bored to tears of his sullen silence. I was worried when he didn't flinch while I played with darling Claire, when he didn't even show those lovely claws. Ali's extends the challenge, demanding 3 tasks to test the human's devotion to Tamlin. "You complete 3 tasks of my choosing, 3 tasks to prove how deep that human sense of loyalty and love runs, and Tamlin is yours." The human's resolve hardens as Ali's speaks, with thinly veiled contempt about their kind's influence over the Fae. "Consider it a favor, High Lord. These human dogs can make our kind so lust-blind that we lose all common sense." Feyre stands firm as Amarantha's voice drips with mockery, her white teeth glinting under the dim light. "I want his curse broken, too. You'll complete all the tasks, or when you can't stand it anymore, all you have to do is answer one question." Amarantha's smile became almost grotesque, and she rubbed a thumb across the dome of her ring. "If you fail a task, there won't be anything left of you for me to play with." His face ghastly white, Tamlin's eyes met with mine, and they almost imperceptibly widened. I could have strangled her for that, but I nodded. But it was either this or death, death like Claire S., slow and brutal. The Ator hissed behind me, a warning to reply. I didn't believe in fate or the cauldron, and I had no other choice. Because when I looked into Tamlin's eyes, even now, seated beside Amarantha as her slave or worse, I loved him with a fierceness that swept up my whole heart. Because when he had widened his eyes, I'd known he still loved me. Fair wakes in a prison cell, her face swollen and bleeding, the air thick with mold and mildew. Her nose is broken, and her jaw throbs with pain as she assesses the damage. I couldn't panic. No, I had to keep my tears in check, had to keep my wits together. It was enough to know that she expected me to die, that there wouldn't be enough left of me for her to torture. Somewhere, not too far off, screaming began. The sound cuts through the silence, sharp and ragged, sending shadows shifting in the dim light. No one speaks, but the tension thickens, heavy with unspoken dread. A high-pitched, pleading bleat, accentuated with crescendos of shrieking that made bile sting in my throat. I might sound like that when faced with Amarantha's first task. A whip cracked and the screaming built, hardly pausing for a breath. Claire had probably cried similarly. I had as good as tortured her myself. What had she made of all this, all these fairies lusting after her blood and misery? I deserved this, deserved whatever pain and suffering was in store if only for what she had endured. But I would make it right. Somehow. Fair awakens in a dim cell, her face throbbing as Lucian slips inside, shutting the door slightly ajar. I had to tell him that I love him, to see if it wasn't too late.
By the cauldron, are you all right?
My agony must have shown because he winced. Well, at least we don't have to lie to you anymore. Let's clean you up a bit. I think my nose is broken, but nothing else.
The guards are drunk, but their replacements will be here soon.
Do it right now. Now. Pain lanced through me, and a crack burst through my ears, my head, before I fainted.
I couldn't heal you completely, they would know someone helped you. The bruises are there along with a hideous black eye, but all the swelling's gone. She wrecked an entire battlefield using their soldiers as shields until their forces were nearly all dead. All that she kept was his finger bone and his eye.
A huntress, she was little more than an immortal, cruel huntress, collecting trophies from her kills and conquests to gloat over through the ages. The rage and despair and horror Jurian must endure every day, for eternity.
Try not to die, will you? I already have a long list of fairies to kill.
Lucian vanished, just vanished into the dim light. A moment later, a yellowish eye tinged with red appeared at the peephole in the door, glared at me, and continued onward. Fair is dragged from her cell by two squat, red-skinned fairies, her focus shifting from hunger to survival as she memorizes the dungeon's layout. All I knew when the door to my cell swung open was that my relentless hunger no longer mattered, and it would be wise not to struggle. She studies Amarantha's throne room, noting exits and the absence of windows, her determination hardening as she prepares for what comes next. Fair observes that the mountain depicted on a map at the manor is located deep within the land, far from the spring court, and concludes that their best chance of escape is to flee toward a cave within the mountain's belly. And the mountain I'd seen depicted on that map at the manor was in the heart of the land, far from the spring court, even farther from the wall. If I were to escape with Tamlin, my best chance would be to run for that cave in the belly of the mountain. As they pass Claire's rotting body, Fair focuses on the assembled court, noting their rich, colorful clothing and the presence of masked fairies among them. Fair is thrown at the dais in the spring court, facing Amarantha's mocking gaze as the High Lady leans against her throne, surveying her with calculated curiosity. You know, I couldn't sleep last night, and I realized why this morning. I don't know your name. If you and I are going to be such close friends for the next 3 months, I should know your name, shouldn't I?
Humans all look alike to me.
You've already learned the consequences of giving false names. The manor's grand hall is silent, except for the measured footsteps of Rysend and the cold scrutiny of Amarantha's gaze. Rysend knew exactly how I looked. He'd recognized me that day at the manor. I willed my features into neutrality as Amarantha's attention again returned to me. Amarantha's curiosity lingers in the air, unspoken but heavy, as the narrator's nervousness tightens their posture. Feyre stands before Rysend, her posture rigid with resolve as she presses him for answers. "What's her name?" she demanded of Rysend. Her voice is steady, but the tremor in her fingers betrays the weight of the question. "How would I know?"
She lied to me. Either toying with Amarantha was a joke to him, as much of a joke as impaling a head in Tamlin's garden, or it was just more court scheming.
Feyre braced herself for the scrape of talons against her mind. Praying Nesta had hired scouts and guards to protect her. "If you're inclined to play games, girl, then I suppose we can do this the fun way." The Ator yanked Lucien forward by the collar of his green tunic, forcing him to his knees as the crowd murmured.
Hold his mind.
Four tall, red-haired high fae from the Autumn Court pressed to the front of the crowd, grinning at Lucien. "Her name, Emissary." Rysend began smiling faintly, and I shuddered at the memory of what those invisible claws had felt like as they gripped my mind. How easy it would have been for him to crush it. "I thought you would have learned your lesson, Lucien, though this time your silence will damn you as much as your tongue." "If we did, lady, we would be the first to tell you." Feyre stands in Amarantha's dungeon, surrounded by Rysend, Lucien, and Tamlin as the High Lord of the Spring Court watches silently. Amarantha's voice rings out, smug and taunting. "There are those who seek me a lifetime but never we meet, and those I kiss but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet." Feyre's breath hitches as she processes the riddle. She releases a shaky sigh when Amarantha does not ask for her family name. I could have wept with relief when she didn't ask for my family name. Amarantha's eyes gleam as she continues, her words laced with cruel precision. Feyre's mind scrambles, desperate to solve the puzzle before time runs out. "I had to solve this riddle, we could all be free." I didn't doubt Amarantha's imagination, and I often awoke sweating and panting from my restless dreams in which I was trapped within a crystal ring, forever silent and forced to witness their bloodthirsty, cruel world cleaved from everything I'd ever loved. Better to be obliterated than to endure Jurian's fate. The sounds of a teeming crowd reverberated against the passageway. My armed escort didn't bother with drawn weapons as they tugged me forward. I wasn't even shackled. Someone or something would catch me before I moved 3 feet and gut me where I stood. The cavernous arena stretched before Feyre, its slick, muddy floor making her struggle to keep her footing as she walked. The torchlit space showed no signs of decoration, its origins unclear. I couldn't tell if it had been hewn from the rock or if it was formed by nature. The floor was slick and muddy, and I struggled to keep my footing as we walked. The enormous crowd pressed in, their cruel, ethereal faces and feral grins radiating menace. Their shouts, though unintelligible, confirmed Feyre's worst fears. She was a spectacle to them and a target. I did my best to keep my chin high as I beheld the exposed labyrinth of tunnels and trenches running along the floor. The half-frozen mud seeped into my pants. Amarantha had only to raise a hand, and the roaring crowd silenced. It became so quiet that Feyre could almost hear her own heart beating. The Fairy Queen's voice cut through the silence. "Your first task is here. Let us see how deep that human affection of yours runs." Feyre's knees locked to keep her upright, though every instinct screamed to flee. Amarantha's smirk widened as she leaned closer. "I took the liberty of learning a few things about you." The Ator's claws seized Feyre, lifting her into the air. Laughter erupted as she was dropped into the mud-filled trench. "Run!" Feyre's gaze locked onto Tamlin's face, memorizing every detail before turning back to the chaos. The ground trembled as something monstrous emerged from the depths. I didn't have the breath for a sob of relief as I slammed into the slick muck. Cold, reeking, smothering. I wiped it from my eyes to find the leering faces of fairies floating above me, laughing. I reached a straight, flat stretch of trench and threw my strength to my legs as I bolted down its course. I finally dared a look over my shoulder, and my fear became wild and thrashing as the worms surged into the path, hot on my trail. Not like this, it couldn't end like this. There was a squelch and a sudden release of pressure around Feyre's middle as she fell through the crack, sprawling in the mud. The crowd sighed. Feyre's heart pounded as she realized the horrifying truth. It was blind. A few fairies peered in, leering from high above the gaping mouth of the pit. The protagonist whirled around, scanning their surroundings, trying to find the fastest way out. I was trapped. Gasping for breath, I fumbled a few steps into the blackness of the tunnel. Feyre stumbles backward, her tailbone screaming in pain as she scrambles away from the worm's den, her hands brushing against smooth, hard objects. I had to get out, now. Feyre, you're ruining everyone's fun. Feyre's fingers close around a gleaming white bone, her breath hitching as she realizes the den is littered with countless skeletal remains. She claws at the mud-streaked walls, her body trembling as fairies laugh and curse her futile attempts to climb free. A mouse in a trap. Need a stepping stool. The exchange highlights the tension and mockery between the two, with one character's humiliation evident in their words. She seized the spark of hope and grabbed the two biggest, strongest bones she could find, jamming them into the wall. It could work if I played it right. If Amarantha wanted me to hunt, I would hunt. Feyre dashed to her bone ladder, ignoring the sting of splinters as she climbed to the third rung. Every inch of me had to be covered.
Feyre just became invisible.
Then, shattering the silence like a shooting star, a voice, Lucian's, bellowed across the chamber. To your left. I bolted, getting a few feet before the wall behind me exploded, mud spraying as the worm burst through, a mass of shredding teeth just inches away. I took the first sharp turn and grabbed onto the bone rail I'd embedded in the corner wall. I used it to swing around, not breaking my speed, propelling me faster, giving me a few more seconds on the worm. My knees and ankles groaned as I fought to keep from slipping in the mud. Only one more turn, then a straight run. I flipped around the final turn, and the roar of the fairies became different than it had been earlier. The worm was a raging, crashing force behind me, but my steps were steady as I flew down the last passage. There was only open black air, reaching up to swallow me. I swung my arms as I careened down, aiming for the spot I'd planned. Pain barked through my bones, my head, as I collided with the muddy ground and rolled. I flipped over myself and screamed as something hit my arm, biting through flesh. But I didn't have time to think, to even look at it, as I scrambled out of the way, as far into the darkness of the worm's den as I could get. I grabbed another bone and whirled when the worm plummeted into the pit. It hit the earth and lashed its massive body to the side, anticipating the strike to kill me, but a wet, crunching noise filled the air instead. And the worm didn't move. I squatted there, gulping down burning air, staring into the abyss of its flesh-shredding mouth, still open wide to devour me. I tightened my grip on the long bone in my hand. I was shaking all over, but not with fear. Oh no, it wasn't fear at all. I'd proved my love and then some. Prove my love. Pain shot through my arm, but I embraced it. I had one. Well, Amarantha said with a little smirk. I suppose anyone could have done that. Naughty, she tusked. Someday, if I lived through this, I would skin her alive. Feyre lies in a dimly lit room, her breath sharp and painful as she clutches her side. The air is thick with tension. Each of my breaths was like swallowing broken glass. A shadow shifts near the door, coalescing into a figure with violet eyes that glow in the dark. Rhysand steps forward, his presence both menacing and commanding. Not a fever, not a fever, not a fever. Feyre's eyelids flutter, her mind racing as she stares at the figure, her fear palpable in the silence. He slowly smiled from where he stood by the door.
What a sorry state for Tamlin's champion.
Go to hell, I snapped, but the words were little more than a wheeze. Feyre lay motionless in the sick room, her body heavy with fever as her vision blurred. My head was light and heavy all at once. If I tried to stand, I would topple over.
What would Tamlin say if he knew his beloved was rotting away down here, burning up with fever? Not that he can even come here, not when his every move is watched.
Get away. Let me see your arm. I kept my nausea down. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, bit it hard enough to draw blood as rivers of fire exploded inside me.
Oh, that's wonderfully gruesome.
Get out, I wheezed. My frail voice was as terrifying as the wound. Feyre stands in the night court, her injured arm trembling as Rhys circles her with calculated intensity. Don't you want me to heal your arm? At what cost? You turned down my offer, And for what? Get out. Though the world spun and danced in my vision, something primal inside me went still and cold beneath that gaze. Let's say I walk out of here. Perhaps Lucian will come to your aid within 5 minutes of my leaving. Perhaps he'll come in 5 days. Perhaps he won't come at all. The uncertainty of Lucian's potential intervention lingers, casting doubt over the path ahead. A hushed conversation unfolds as a figure speaks of Tamlin's reluctant intervention to spare Lucian from Amarantha's wrath. Between you and me, he's been keeping a low profile after his rather embarrassing outburst at your trial. Amarantha's not exactly pleased with him. Tamlin even broke his delightful brooding to beg for him to be spared, such a noble warrior, your High Lord. She listened, of course, but only after she made Tamlin bestow Lucian's punishment. 20 lashes. The speaker's voice wavers as they recount the brutal reality of Tamlin's reluctant compliance, their body trembling with the weight of it all.
Rysen shrugged, a beautiful, easy gesture.
The unnamed character crouched in front of Fair, his voice laced with calculated menace. So, it's really a question of how much you're willing to trust Lucian and how much you're willing to risk for it. Fair's stomach tightened as she stared at him, her hatred burning in her gaze. Go to hell. He lashed out, twisting the shard of bone in her arm until a scream tore from her throat. This is the last time I'll extend my assistance, he said, his voice cold as he wiped spittle from his face. I'd known it for some time now. He'd sent me to hunt the Suriel with a few knives and a bow. Might not understand the gravity of an infection like this. The weight of uncertainty lingers as the scene unfolds, marked by a single line that captures the fragile hope and dread of the moment. He might come a day, an hour, a minute too late. The words hang in the air, a quiet echo of the tension between anticipation and the fear of missed opportunity. Fair's voice wavers as she halts Rysend mid-transformation, her plea echoing through the chamber. Wait.
If I told you those things there'd be no fun in it, would there?
Fair demands a concession, her resolve hardening as she bargains for time. Just 2 weeks.
2 teensy, tiny weeks with me every month is all I ask.
The ritual concludes with a permanent, otherworldly mark etched into Fair's flesh. Make it go away.
It's custom in my court for bargains to be permanently marked upon flesh.
Fair stands in a long marble hallway, her back aching as she scrubs the floor with a brush and bucket provided by 2 red-skinned guards. I had an absurd, creeping feeling that it watched me. If it's not washed and shining by supper, we're to tie you to the spit and give you a few good turns over the fire. An impossible task, a task to torment me. Fair scrubbed the floor with a brush, the coarse bristles crinkling against the tiles as she worked. I cursed as I scrubbed harder, the coarse bristles of the brush crinkling and whispering against the tiles. I'd probably wail and beg for mercy when they rotated me on that spit. A door clicked open somewhere down the hall, and I shot to my feet. An auburn head peered at me. I sagged with relief. Lucian, not Lucian. The face that turned toward me was female and unmasked. She looked perhaps a bit older than Amarantha, but her porcelain skin was exquisitely colored, graced with the faintest blush of rose along her cheeks. Had the red hair not been indication enough, when her russet eyes met mine, I knew who she was. For giving her your name, in place of my son's life. My debt is paid. It was only after the door shut that I realized I should have thanked her. And only after I looked in my bucket that I realized I'd been hiding my left arm behind my back. I knelt beside the bucket and dipped my fingers into the water. They came out clean. I shuddered, allowing myself a moment to slump over my knees before I dumped some of the water onto the floor and watched it wash away the muck. The protagonist stands in a dark bedroom, illuminated only by flickering candles, facing a towering fireplace covered in lentils and ash. To the chagrin of the guards, I had completed their impossible task. Clean it up before the occupant returns, or he'll peel off your skin in strips. Sorting lentils from ash and embers, ridiculous, wasteful end. Fair kneels before Rysend's fireplace, her hands black with soot as she searches for lentils hidden in the ashes. They said I had to clean out lentils from the ashes, or you'd rip off my skin.
Do I want to know why you're digging through my fireplace?
Fair stands defiantly, gripping an iron poker as Rysand lounges on the bed, his tone laced with amusement. Is this clean enough for you?
Why were there lentils in my fireplace to begin with?
Fair glares at Rysand, her voice sharp as she accuses him of assigning her the task. One of your mistress's household chores, I suppose. The speaker's voice trembles as she confronts Rysand, her words laced with suspicion. Apparently she or her cronies think I'll find some sport with you. You lied to her about Claire. You knew very well what I looked like.
Amarantha plays her games and I play mine.
Fair stands motionless as the figure before her shifts, their expression a careful mask of control. Do not think, Fair, that it did not cost me. His smile does not reach his eyes, the weight of unspoken sacrifice pressing between them. Are you going to put down that poker, or can I expect you to start swinging soon? This is just the remnant, the scraps I get to play with. I lifted the iron poker, just a little bit. Rysand rolled his neck, and it all vanished in a flash. The wings, the talons, the feet, leaving only the male behind, well-dressed and unruffled. I had made a very, very big mistake in offering my life to him.
Don't waste your breath, I can't tell you, no one here can.
A chilling command echoes through the room. If you do, you're to take your own daggers and gut yourselves. Understood. The captives nod dazedly, their bodies trembling before they force themselves to straighten, masking their fear with rigid compliance. Fair conceals her shaking hands, her mind reeling from the glamour's grip as the others hover near her, too terrified to touch her. I was alone, utterly alone, locked in silence, though the screaming in the dungeons still continued day and night. If I was counting the schedule of my meals correctly, about 4 days after I'd seen Rysand in his room, 2 high fae females arrived in my cell. None of the guards stopped us, they didn't even look in our direction. A tense interaction unfolds in the spring court, marked by physical proximity and unspoken tension. The atmosphere is thick with unease as 2 figures stand close, their movements constrained. Fair's voice trembles slightly as she describes the sensation. Their brushes were unbearably cold and ticklish, and their shadowy grips were firm when I wriggled. The moment lingers in awkward silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing against the fragile space between them. Fair stands in the night court's hall, her body adorned with cosmetics and tattoos, forced into a gauzy white dress that barely covers her. Our bargain hasn't started yet. Rysand leans against the wall, his violet eyes gleaming as he remarks on her appearance.
I don't like my belongings tampered with.
Fair's hands tremble as she recalls Tamlin's words, her humiliation compounded by Rysand's possessive claim over her. I had to clench my teeth to keep them from chattering. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd attached a collar and leash around my neck. Maybe he would at some point, now that I was bound to him, the bargain marked on my flesh. Whispers snaked under the shouts of celebrating, and even the music quieted as the crowd parted and made a path for us to Amarantha's dais. I'd beaten her first task, I'd beaten her menial chores, I could keep my head high.
1 week with me at the night court every month in exchange for my healing services after her first task. For the rest of her life.
The scene unfolds with a charged atmosphere as Rysand and Fair engage in a subtle power struggle. Games, Rysand liked to play games, and it seemed I was now to be a key player in whatever this one was. Fair's realization underscores the tension, hinting at a deeper game of strategy and control. Amarantha stands at the edge of the spring court's grand hall, her fingers idly twisting the bone pendant at her throat as guests murmur around her. Her expression is a mask of icy detachment, the air around her humming with unspoken menace. Enjoy my party. Fair stands rigid in the night court hall, her chin lifted despite the weight of Rysand's symbols painted across her skin and the humiliation of Tamlin's unblinking gaze. She refuses to acknowledge the crowd, fearing another glance at Tamlin or a glimpse of Lucian's expression. I wouldn't let the others notice that weakness, wouldn't let them know how much it killed me to be so exposed to them, to have Rysand's symbols painted over nearly every inch of my skin, to have Tamlin see me so debased.
Drink, you'll need it.
No, Ali said not to drink the wine here, wine that was different from that joyous, freeing solstice wine. My traitorous fingers latched onto the goblet as the fairies watched, their silent laughter echoing in the cell. "Drink," he said, and the room spun as my stomach rebelled, vomiting violently onto the cold stone floor. I was tied to a spinning wheel, going around and around and around. Needless to say, I was sick a fair amount that day.
Shit, it's freezing in here.
It was, but I was too nauseated to notice. Keeping my head up was an effort, let alone keeping the food down. He unclasped his cloak and set it around my shoulders. Its heavy warmth leaked into me. "Who did that to me?"
Who do you think?
Fair confronts Lucian about her tattoo and the events of the previous night in an intense, emotionally charged exchange. I was dying, I had a fever, I was barely able to keep conscious. How was I supposed to know you'd come?
I risked my neck for you during your task. Was that not enough? You offered up your name for me. After all that I said to you, all I did, you still offered up your name.
Fair confronts Lucian about his unspoken oath to Tamlin, their voices thick with unresolved tension and mutual respect.
Didn't you realize I would help you after that, oath or no oath?
"I'm sorry that she still punished you for helping me during my task. I heard what she made Tamlin do to you." Rysen's fingers curled into a fist. The fairy male's eyes went wide, then glazed as he slumped to the side in the puddle of his own waste. The moment hung heavy with the tension of unspoken threats and physical force. Blood leaked from his nose, from his ears, pooling on the floor. That fast, that easily, that irrevocably, he was dead. I said shatter his mind, not his brain. The crowd murmured around me, stirring. I wanted nothing more than to fade back into it, to crawl back into my cell and burn this from my mind. Tamlin hadn't flinched, not a muscle. What horrors had he witnessed in his long life if this hadn't broken that distant expression, that control? Rysen shrugged, his hand sliding back into his pocket. The throne room is silent, except for the echo of footsteps, as the unnamed male character approaches the queen. "Apologies, my queen." He turns away without being dismissed, his gaze fixed on the back of the throne room as he strides toward the exit. Fair trembled as she walked beside Rysend, the crowd's whispers of "whore" and Amarantha's "whore" echoing behind them. "Whore. Good that you killed him, good that you killed the traitor." "Begin," Amarantha snapped. Before Fair could brace herself, the floor shuddered. Her knees wobbled, and she swung her arms to keep upright as the stones beneath her began sinking, lowering her into a large, rectangular pit. She scanned the four walls around her, looking for a door, for any sign of what was to come, while Tamlin's gaze remained locked onto hers until his face disappeared beyond the edge of the pit. The chamber's polished stone walls gleamed under harsh light, enclosing Fair in a space with only an iron grate separating her from Lucian, his body chained to the floor. Lucian. Again, he was to be Amarantha's toy to torment. At a fairy gathering, the protagonist stands frozen, her eyes fixed on a structure with thick, wide holes that could allow her to climb and jump onto Rysen's side. I could probably climb it to jump onto his side. I didn't dare. Had Rysend bet on me again? As murmurs ripple through the crowd, the protagonist stiffens, her gaze sweeping the room for Rysend's family. I stiffen my spine. Fair scans the crowd at the edge of the pit, her eyes searching for the High Lord of the Autumn Court. Only Amarantha stands with Tamlin, her posture poised and unreadable. "Here, Fair, darling, you shall find your task. Simply answer the question by selecting the correct lever, and you'll win." Fair's fingers curl into her palms as she locks eyes with Amarantha, the weight of the challenge pressing against her chest like a physical force. Amarantha gestured to a wall inscribed with ancient symbols, beneath which 3 stone levers marked I, and I stood. 2 giant, spike-encrusted grates began lowering from above, their red-hot spikes glowing with lethal intent. Fair whirled to Lucian, realizing the grate's descent meant watching him crushed beneath it as she herself faced the same fate. She stared at the inscription, trembling as she recognized only basic words like "thee" and "but." I recognized only basic words, useless ones like "thee" and "but" and went. The grate descended further, now level with Amarantha's head. Lucian, bound in chains, shouted as Fair struggled to decipher the inscription, her eyes stinging with panic.
Answer it.
The world was just a blur of letters, mocking me with their turns and shapes. The metal groaned as it scraped against the smooth stone of the chamber, and the fairies' whispers grew more frenzied. Through the holes in the grate, Feyre thought she saw Lucian's eldest brother chuckle.
Fair. Just pick one.
Hot, so unbearably hot. It would hurt. Those spikes were large and blunt. It wouldn't be quick. Sweat slid down Feyre's neck as she stared at the letters, at the I, and I that had somehow become her lifeline. Two, it was two. I could gladly, willingly, fanatically believe in a cauldron and fate if they would take care of me. She reached for the second lever, but a blinding pain racked her hand before she could touch the stone. She hissed, withdrawing, and opened her palm to reveal the slitted eye tattooed there. It narrowed. Feyre's fingers met stone, and she looked up to find the grate not 4 feet from her head. Through it, Rysen's star-flecked violet gaze stared back.
His face remained a mask of boredom as Feyre reached for the third lever.
I could only trust him. I could only give myself up again, forced to concede by my helplessness. The spikes were so enormous up close. All Feyre had to do was lift her arm above her head, and she'd burn the flesh off her hands.
Fair, please.
Feyre's trembling fingers hovered near the searing metal. Her breath ragged as Lucian's voice cracked with desperation. Feyre's hands tremble as she grips the stone lever, her body shaking from the heat of the spikes pressing against her. I couldn't read, and it had almost killed me. Lucian kneels repeatedly, kissing the ground in silent reverence as the grate lifts, revealing cool air flooding the chamber.
Don't let her see you cry.
Feyre sinks to her knees, tears burning her eyes as she clutches her trembling hands to her face, her voice breaking in a whisper. I wept for hours. For myself, for Tamlin, for the fact that I should be dead and had somehow survived. The scene captures a moment of overwhelming despair, with the protagonist's internal turmoil reaching its peak. I wanted to be crushed. I wanted to be snuffed out. Everything converged, squeezing inward, sucking out air. The room is thick with tension as the walls seem to press inward, suffocating the figure standing in the center. I couldn't keep myself in my body. The walls were forcing me out of it. The words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of unseen forces pulling her apart. Feyre reflects on the pain of maintaining her connection to the Fey world, her body rejecting the effort. I was grasping for my body, but it hurt too much each time I tried to maintain the connection. All I had wanted, all I had dared want, was a life that was quiet, easy. Nothing more than that, nothing extraordinary. Feyre stands in a dark chamber, her hands pressed to her face as the walls close in around her. The air is heavy with unspoken tension.
Still weeping. You've just beaten her second task. Tears are unnecessary.
Feyre stands in a dim, star-flecked cell, her body taut as Tamlin's hands hold her in place. His mouth brushes her cheek, his tongue tracing away her tears with a slow, deliberate heat. I figured that would get you to stop crying. It was disgusting. Do you want me to kiss your feet for what you did at the trial? Not unless you feel compelled to do so. In a tense confrontation within a dimly lit cell, the speaker's simmering anger erupts as they lash out at Tamlin. You're a disgusting bastard.
I'll have to ask Tamlin if this kind of flattery won his heart.
A flash in time for them, a drop in the pool of their eons. So I greedily drank the wine, and I stopped caring about who I was and what had once mattered to me. About the green of Tamlin's eyes, about all those things I had still wanted to paint and now would never get to. A lone figure stands at the edge of a treacherous mountain pass, their resolve unshaken by the perilous terrain. I wasn't going to leave this mountain alive. Their words echo with a determination that defies the storm raging above. Feyre was walking to the dressing chamber with Rysen's 2 shadow servants, staring at nothing and thinking of even less, when a hissing noise and the flap of wings sounded from around an upcoming corner. I was walking to the dressing chamber with Rysen's 2 shadow servants, staring at nothing and thinking of even less, when a hissing noise and the flap of wings sounded from around an upcoming corner. The shadow servants tensed, their chins rising slightly, as the Auteur's presence stirred a dormant dread in Feyre, causing her mouth to turn dry as they neared the bend. Alise and her escorts hide in shadows as Auteur and a guttural-voiced creature discuss plans involving Amarantha and the High King of Hybern. The tension is palpable as they eavesdrop on a dangerous conspiracy. She'll be most pleased to hear that they're ready at last. If your lady thinks she's above the king because she rules this wretched land, she'll soon remember who can strip her powers away, without spells and potions. My blood went cold. I trusted Nesta to get my family away to protect them. I was watching the light dance along the damp stones of the ceiling of my cell, like moonlight on water. The music folded over itself like batter being poured from a bowl, one note atop another, melting together to form a whole, rising, filling me. There was beauty in this music, beauty and goodness. I lurked by a wall, forgotten by the crowd, waiting for Rysen to beckon me to drink the wine and dance or do whatever it was he wished of me. I was clothed in my typical attire, tattooed from the neck down with that blue-black paint. Tonight my gossamer gown was a shade of sunset pink, the color too bright and feminine against the whorls of paint on my skin. He'd tire of her soon. The internal monologue reveals a moment of reflection amidst the tension between two central figures. Lucian never spoke to me in public, and Tamlin, it had become difficult to look at him in recent days. I just wanted it done. In the dim glow of a solitary chamber, the weight of impending fate hangs heavy in the air. A single glass of wine is raised, its contents trembling slightly as the speaker steadies their breath. I wanted that wine to carry me through this last night and bring me to my fate. I was so intent on anticipating Rysen's order to serve him that I didn't notice that someone stood beside me until the heat from his body leaked onto mine. I went rigid when I smelled that rain and earthen scent and didn't dare to turn to Tamlin. We stood side by side, staring out at the crowd, as still and unnoticeable as statues. His fingers brushed mine, and a line of fire went through me, burning me so badly that my eyes pricked with tears. My heart beat faster than it ever had during my trials. I could scarcely breathe as I moved nearer and nearer to the door, past Amarantha's dais, past a group of giggling fairies. I couldn't kiss him deeply enough, couldn't hold him tightly enough, couldn't touch enough of him. Our tongues danced, not a waltz or a minuet, but a war dance, a death dance of bone drums and screaming fiddles. This might be the last time I touched him, the last time we could be together. We both knew what tomorrow would bring.
Shameful.
He hadn't come in through the throne room. Feyre froze, her voice trembling as she whispered, "My father killed Tamlin's father and his brothers."
It's a long story, and I don't feel like getting into it, but let's just say that when she stole our lands out from under us, Amarantha decided that she especially wanted to punish the son of her friend's murderer, decided that she hated me enough for my father's deeds that I was to suffer. So here we are with the fate of our immortal world in the hands of an illiterate human. What a mess.
In the throne room of the Spring Court, Feyre's internal monologue reveals her anxiety as she recalls Tamlin's interruption of her encounter with Amarantha. He'd known Amarantha was coming. Maybe he'd done it to make her jealous, but maybe. I didn't want to consider what the punishment might have been. Regardless of his motives or his methods, Rysand was keeping me alive. The speaker rises abruptly, his voice taut with regret as he addresses Amarantha in the dim confines of the mountain. "I've told you too much. If you were clever, you'd find a way to use this against me. And if you had any stomach for cruelty, you'd go to Amarantha and tell her the truth about her whore." Feyre stands before Amarantha's throne, her fists clenched as the queen's guards drag 3 hooded figures to their knees. "I love you, no matter what she says about it, no matter if it's only with my insignificant human heart. Even when they burn my body, I'll love you." Pity, the answer is so lovely. It wasn't like hunting, it wasn't for survival or defense. It was cold-blooded murder, the murder of them, of my very soul. I wished I knew the name of one of our forgotten gods so that I might beg them to intercede, wished I knew any prayers at all to plead for guidance, for absolution. But I did not know those prayers, or the names of our forgotten gods, only the names of those who would remain enslaved if I did not act. The protagonist stands frozen, their breath shallow as the weight of impending sacrifice settles over them. I silently recited those names, even as the horror of what knelt before me began to swallow me whole. A flicker of determination hardens their resolve as they confront the impossible choice ahead. These deaths would not be wasted, even if it would damn me forever. Feyre stands before 3 kneeling figures, her hands trembling as she grips a dagger. She resolves to sacrifice 3 lives for Prythian's liberation, her voice steady despite the weight of her decision. Please. Not so fast. The High Fae youth pleads with wide, desperate eyes as Amarantha mocks Feyre's hesitation, her tone laced with cruel amusement. Please. Saying I'm sorry wasn't enough. Feyre's grip tightens on the dagger as the youth's plea echoes, his blue eyes reflecting a sky she fears she will never see again. Please. Someone in the crowd began weeping. I was taking him away from someone who possibly loved him as much as I loved Tamlin. Kill a fairy, fall in love with a fairy, then be forced to kill a fairy to keep that love. It was brilliant and cruel, and she knew it. Darkness rippled near the throne, and then Rysand appeared, arms crossed as if he had moved to better see. His expression was a mask of disinterest, though his posture suggested otherwise. His face was a mask of disinterest, but my hand tingled. Do it, the tingling said. Don't, the young fairy moaned. Please, his voice rose to a shriek. A sudden, unidentifiable sound echoes through the air, snapping Feyre from her thoughts. The sound jarred me so much that I lunged. Her startled reaction hints at the mysterious event that could alter the course of her journey. Feyre plunges a dagger into the heart of a hooded figure, the blade passing through flesh and bone as blood splatters her hands. Very good, now the next. Oh, don't look so miserable, Feyre. Aren't you having fun? Feyre weeps as she yanks the dagger free, the vibrations of the victim's bones against the blade stinging her hand. I wept, yanking out the dagger, the reverberations of his bones against the blade stinging my hand. A female fairy in black kneels, reciting a prayer as Feyre hesitates, her hand trembling near a second dagger. Cauldron save me, mother hold me, guide me to you. Feyre collapses inward, her voice breaking as she realizes her actions have condemned her to eternal separation from the immortal realm. In saving Tamlin, I was to damn myself. A sob broke from my lips, let me feel no pain. The words trembled on my tongue, raw and desperate, as I clung to the fading hope of escape. I'm sorry, I moaned, my voice cracking under the weight of guilt and grief. Feyre stands motionless, her bronze eyes steady as she whispers, let me enter eternity, her voice trembling with resignation. Let me enter eternity. As she lifts the ash dagger, her hand coated in blood, the fairies wail around her. She stumbles back when the hood is removed from the figure kneeling before her, revealing Tamlin's face. Not fair. I wasn't aware you humans knew of the concept. Feyre's knees buckle as Amarantha's laughter echoes through the throne room, her smile grotesque as she snaps her fingers, transforming Tamlin into the Ator. Amarantha stands in the center of the chamber, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Her defiance is palpable, her posture rigid with unshakable intent. Unless you think it would be more appropriate to forfeit your life. After all, what's the point? Her words hang in the air, a challenge wrapped in cold calculation. The weight of her resolve is undeniable, her eyes burning with a mixture of cruelty and determination. Her words were like poison. To survive only to lose him. Imagine all those years you were going to spend together, suddenly alone. Tragic, really. Though a few months ago you hated our kind enough to butcher us, surely you'll move on easily enough. Tamlin's voice rings out, his defiance evident as he declares, Jurian's human lover did. He remains on his knees, his eyes blazing with challenge. What will it be, Feyre? She asks, her tone laced with manipulation as she watches Feyre's internal struggle unfold. Feyre's internal monologue reveals her grim calculation. Kill him and save his court, or kill myself and let them all live as Amarantha's slaves. The weight of her choice crushes her. Alise stands alone, the weight of unspoken truths pressing against her. Alise had been right. The words hang in the air, a confirmation of past suspicions and a catalyst for what comes next. But Alise had said something to help me. To listen to what I'd heard, as if I'd already learned everything I needed. I slowly faced Tamlin again. Memories flashed, one after another, blurs of color and words. Milady stands in the manor's dimly lit hall, her hands clenched at her sides as memories of Tamlin's evasions resurface. He lied to me about everything, about why I'd been brought to the manor, about what was happening on his lands.
Milady makes no bargains that are not advantageous to her.
And that was when I knew. I couldn't breathe, not as I replayed the memory, not as I recalled the conversation I'd overheard one day. In the dining room, Lucian and Tamlin stand with the door open, their voices carrying through the hall as Feyre listens, her mind racing.
For someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days.
Feyre's gaze flicks to Tamlin's chest, recalling a memory of the Ator in the garden, laughing as he taunts Tamlin. Though you have a heart of stone, Tamlin, you certainly keep a host of fear inside it. She realizes Amarantha's control over Tamlin, and all the High Lords, rests on binding their magic, just as she keeps Jurian's soul tethered to his eye and bone. Trust no one, Ali's had told me, but I trusted Tamlin, and more than that, I trusted myself. Feyre steps toward Tamlin, her resolve hardening. The revelation is clear on her face, and Tamlin's breathing quickens as he lifts his chin, defiance flickering in his gaze. I could be wrong, I could be painfully, tragically wrong. There was such a thing as fate, because fate had made sure I was there to eavesdrop when they'd spoken in private. There was a faint smile on Tamlin's lips as I stood over him, ash dagger in hand. I'm going to make you pay for your insolence, and I crashed to the floor. My very bones were shattering as my body rose and then slammed onto the hard floor, and I was crushed beneath another wave of torturous agony. Please. I flashed between my body and his, seeing myself through his eyes, bleeding and broken and sobbing. Stop, stop, don't pretend you care, human. I'd been starving, desperate. Yet afterward, once my family had devoured it, I had crept back into the woods and wept for hours, knowing a line had been crossed, my soul stained. Say that you don't love him. Because loving Tamlin was the only thing I had left, the only thing I couldn't sacrifice.
Stop, I'm sorry for what I said about Clythia all those years ago, please.
Feyre is trapped in a fiery pit of pain, her mind flashing to memories of an enchanted forest as Amarantha's magic tears at her. Say that you don't truly love him.
I'll do anything.
I would never say it, never let her hear that, even if she killed me. Feyre stands alone, her resolve hardening as she contemplates the risks of her love for Tamlin. And if it was to be my downfall, so be it. If it would be the weakness that would break me, I would embrace it with all my heart. Her voice trembles slightly, but her eyes blaze with determination as she faces the inevitable. If this was. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. That's what these 3 months had been, a slow, horrible death. What I felt for Tamlin was the cause of this. Say it, you vile beast. But I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. She might have lied her way out of our bargain, but she'd sworn differently with the riddle, instantaneous freedom, regardless of her will. Blood filled my mouth, warm as it dribbled out between my lips. I gazed at Tamlin's masked face one last time. Love, I breathed, the world crumbling into a blackness with no end. A body lies prostrate on the bloodied floor, head twisted at a grotesque angle. Lucian's fox mask falls away, revealing a scarred but handsome face as he stares at the corpse.
I've seen this before, not this, but the way it ends. You think this is a game, you think I'll let you take her again.
Tamlin shifted into his beast form, his fur and claws striking fear as he gripped Amarantha by the neck, shoving her against the wall with lethal force.
Tam, Lucian cried over the chaos.
After driving a sword through Amarantha's head, Tamlin cradled Feyre's broken body, his tears falling onto her tunic as he rocked her, whispering apologies.
No, someone breathed Lucian, his sword dangling from his hand.
The High Lord of the Autumn Court approached Tamlin, extending a clenched hand, and a glittering spark fell onto Feyre's chest, flaring briefly before vanishing. 2 more figures approached, both handsome and young. I was swimming, kicking for the surface, where Tamlin was waiting, where life was waiting. Up and up, frantic for air. Tamlin's arms pulled her from the water, his grip unrelenting as he dragged her toward the shore. The air hit my lungs like a blade, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. Feyre lies on the cold floor of the throne room, her skin gleaming with an unnatural light as she realizes she is no longer mortal. I had killed those two high fae, I had. Tamlin stands behind her, his presence steady as he reassures her with a quiet command.
See for yourself.
Feyre turns to face Tamlin, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and hope as she studies his face. He was exactly how I dreamed he would be. Every word, every breath was too loud, every smell too strong, the light too bright.
Tamlin at last noticed my dull eyes, my silence, and took my...
He escorted me through the labyrinth of tunnels and hallways until we found a quiet bedroom in a distant wing of the court. Tamlin inspects Feyre's bare leg in his study, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within. This was what I had murdered those fairies for.
How can I ever repay you for what you did?
Feyre grips Tamlin's tattooed arm, her voice trembling as she insists. Later. Later. Feyre lies in a spring court bedroom, her body trembling as Tamlin's hands trace her skin, the air thick with unspoken words.
Later, he echoed and leaned down to kiss me.
I didn't want apologies, didn't want sympathy or coddling. Feyre sits alone in the dim light, her fingers curling around the edges of a torn page as memories flood back. The weight of past choices lingers in the air around her. A kiss for each day we'd spent apart, a kiss for every wound and terror, a kiss for the ink etched into my flesh, and for all the days we would be together after this. Days, perhaps, that I no longer deserved. Her voice trembles, the words heavy with the ache of longing and the bitterness of regret, as if speaking them aloud might finally unburden her. But I gave myself again to that fire, threw myself into it, into him, and let myself burn. I was pulled from sleep by something tugging at my middle, a thread deep inside. I left Tamlin sleeping in the bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. In a few hours, we would be leaving under the mountain and returning home, and I didn't want to wake him sooner than I had to. The POV character moves down the hall, her steps unsteady as she adjusts to her new body's unfamiliar balance and rhythms. I knew who summoned me long before I opened the door to the hall. Reaching a balcony jutting from the mountain, she shields her eyes from the sudden brightness, hissing in reaction to the light. Feyre stood on the mountain summit, her eyes stung by the light. I'd thought it was the middle of the night. I'd completely lost all sense of time in the darkness of the mountain.
Just to say goodbye. A warm breeze ruffled his hair, brushing tendrils of darkness off his shoulders.
Feyre looked at him, noting his membranous wings tucked behind him. What do you want?
Before your beloved whisks you away forever.
Feyre wiggled her tattooed fingers. Don't you get a week every month?
How could I forget?
Feyre stared at his nose, the violet eyes that had been so filled with pain. Why?
Because I didn't want you to fight alone or die alone.
Feyre blinked, this time not at the brightness of the sun. Thank you, she said, her throat tight. This body is different, but this is still human. Feyre put her hand on her chest, her voice hoarse. This is still human. Feyre stands in a cavern deep within the mountain, dawn light filtering through the narrow entrance as she faces Rysand. The air between them is thick with unspoken words. I can't tell whether I want it to.
Be glad of your human heart, Feyre. Pity those who don't feel anything at all.
Rysand's gaze lingers on Feyre's face, his expression shifting from guarded to stunned. He stumbles back, his wings vanishing as he fades into the shadows. What is? Before she can finish, Rysand disappears entirely. Tamlin grips Feyre's hand as they exit the cave, the sealed remnants of Amarantha's court collapsing behind them. The breeze, the scent of wildflowers hit me, and despite the hole in my chest, the stain on my soul, I couldn't stop the smile that spread as we mounted a steep hill. Her fairy legs, now far stronger than her human ones, carried her effortlessly up the incline, a stark contrast to the exhaustion she once felt in this same place. Reaching the top of the knoll, she stood winded but unbroken, the weight of her past and the lightness of her newfound strength coexisting in the quiet moment. Feyre stands before the rose-covered manor, her breath stolen by the sight. But the breath was knocked from my chest when I beheld the rose-covered manor. Home,